Hello guys, welcome to the fiction series. Today we are gonna see, what if Naruto got harem with Lee and Azula? Part 2. If you want more awesome fan fiction like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So without wasting any time, let's get into the video. The journey was long and annoying, but now you get to see what it's really about. The destination. Sokka stated as he, Katara, Aang, Appa and Momo had made it through the cave of two lovers. Having traveled through the cave in order to reach Amashu, so Aang would get the chance to learn earthbending from his old friend, King Bumi. All of them being relieved and happy to finally make it after having dealt with General Fong, then getting lost in the cave. With Aang also being happy at seeing his friend again and being able to learn earthbending from him. I present to you the Earth Kingdom city of O, said Sokka, holding his hand out to the city only for his eyes to widen, with Aang's and Katara's doing the same at the sight before them. Seeing the Fire Nation banner hanging from the gates of the city, buildings that look to be converted into factories releasing smoke into the air, metal bridges extending over the gorge, and what looked like a statue was being constructed at the very top of the city where the palace once was. Oh no, Sokka muttered in disbelief and despair at seeing Amashu has now fallen into the Fire Nation as well, with Aang walking forward with a shocked expression at what's happened. I can't believe it. I know the war has spread far, but Amashu always seemed untouchable, said Aang, not believing that Amashu's already fallen and is under the Fire Nation's control. Especially since they had been not too long ago, with the young Avatar starting to see just how far the war has spread across the Earth Kingdom. Up until now, it was. Now Ba Sing Se is the only great Earth Kingdom stronghold left, said Sokka while crossing his arms, knowing with Amashu conquered, Ba Sing Se was the only thing left keeping the Fire Nation from controlling the entire world. This is horrible, Katara stated, walking up to Aang, saddened at seeing the city under the Fire Nation's control, but also knew they couldn't do anything. But we have to move on, said Katara while turning towards Aang, knowing they needed to keep moving to find someone who can teach him earthbending, otherwise the Fire Nation will just keep gaining more and more power. No, I'm going in to find Bumi, Aang said, refusing to leave his friend behind as a prisoner in his own city, making Katara and Sokka look at him in surprise that he wanted to go into the city. Aang, stop. We don't even know if Bumi's still, Sokka said before stopping, not wanting to say it, since Bumi is one of Aang's oldest and still living friends, but he also doubted the Fire Nation would keep the king of Amashu alive. What? If he's still what, demanded Aang, looking at Sokka while knowing what he was going to say, but refused to believe his friend is dead. Stay around, replied Sokka while looking away unsurely. I know you had your heart set on Bumi, but there are other people who can teach you earthbending, Katara assured, believing there are plenty of other powerful earthbenders that can teach him. This isn't about finding a teacher. This is about finding my friend, Aang stated before turning back to the city, not caring if he never finds an earthbending master, only caring about finding and saving his friend. Later. Waiting until the sun started going down so they wouldn't be spotted, Aang had Appa bring them down to one of the cliffsides of Amashu, where a tunnel was. A secret passage. Why didn't we just use this last time? Sokka asked in annoyance that Aang knew about a secret passage into the city, with the Avatar grunting as he tried prying the grating off with his staff. Before finally getting it under the grating and jerked it off, revealing it was full of sewage, much to Sokka's disgust. Does that answer your question? Asked Aang before flipping into the sewer tunnel, followed by Sokka and Katara. Moving up and through the sewer, Aang created an air ball with his staff to clear a path through the sewage, while Katara used her waterbending to maneuver the sewage around her. With Sokka being unable to do anything as he was continuously soaked in the sewage, while being further disgusted whenever it got in his mouth. Luckily, it wasn't long before they arrived at an exit, with Aang releasing a burst of air at the sewer grate to loosen it, looking around to see if anyone was around. Seeing the coast was clear, Aang moved the grate aside and jumped out, with Katara climbing up after him. That wasn't as bad as I thought, Katara stated, having expected it to be much worse besides the smell, before they heard a groaning coming from the tunnel. Looking, they saw Sokka climbing out, completely covered in sewage, making him look like a monster rising up. Before Katara spotted a barrel of water and bent the water, launching a stream of water at her brother that washed away all the sewage waste. With Aang swinging his staff, releasing a blast of wind that dried him off as well. Which also revealed 3 small purple creatures on him, 2 of which being stuck to his cheeks and a third on the back of his neck. Ah. They won't let go. Help. Sokka screamed as he tried prying the creatures off, only to panic when they wouldn't come off, before he was suddenly tackled by Aang into a wall. SHH. Stop making so much noise. It's just a purple pentapus, Aang said to calm him down, with the non-bender looked at the pentapuses on his face in fear, feeling them sucking on his skin. But the Avatar grabbing one and lightly scratching its head, causing the pentapus to remove its tentacles before Aang pulled it off, revealing red spots where its suckers were attached. Knowing how to remove them, Sokka hastily scratched the second one and pulled it off as well. "Hey!" Someone shouted as Aang went to remove the third from Sokka's neck, the trio looking only to see 3 Fire Nation guards coming towards them. Seeing this, Katara and Sokka quickly stood in front of Aang, while the airbender wrapped a cloth around his head to hide his arrow. "What are you kids doing out past curfew?" the lead guard demanded, narrowing his eyes at them suspiciously for being out this late. "Sorry. We were just on our way home," replied Katara before they turned and began walking away to avoid being questioned further, only for the guard to see the red spots on Sokka's neck from the pentapus. "Wait, what's the matter with him?" said the guard, making the kid stop while Katara glanced at her brother's neck, thinking of an idea to get the guards to leave. He has pentapox, sir," Katara said quickly, while turning Sokka around to show the other spots on his face, with the guard walking up to them, looking at Sokka closely before reaching to touch him to see if he was sick. It's highly contagious," added Katara, causing the guard to pull his hand back before stepping back when Sokka began groaning. "Oh, it's so awful. I'm dying." Sokka groaned as if he was in complete pain while moving towards the guard, making him step back in fear. "And deadly," Katara said, knowing that'll get them to leave, with the 3 guards now moving back, away from the sick and dying Sokka. "Hey, I think I heard of pentapox. Didn't your cousin Chang die of it?" said the guard while looking at another, making them all freak out as they kept backing away. "We'd better go wash our hands and burn our clothes," the second guard said before they ran away to avoid being infected, with Sokka coughing a few times before dropping the act. "Thank you, so we're friends," said Aang, smiling while scratching one of the pentapuses, knowing they now had a way to make sure the guard stayed away from them if they were spotted. Later. Moving through the city, Aang, Katara and Sokka, along with Momo who joined them after Appa found a place to land outside the city. With the 4 of them moving to a higher level of the city, seeing all the scaffolding set up everywhere as the stone was slowly being replaced by metal. Before they quickly hid behind a pile of metal bars as a guard patrol walked past them. "Let's find Bumi and get out of here," Katara said, not wanting to stay here any longer than they needed to and risk being found, doubting they'd be able to make it out of the city in one piece with all the firebenders. "Where would they be keeping him?" questioned Sokka, wondering where they'd even keep someone like Bumi, with how powerful he was and the entire city being made of stone for him to bend. "Somewhere he can't earthbend. Somewhere made of metal," Aang replied, looking around the city, seeing any place that looked like it'd be where Bumi was being kept. The group kept moving to find anywhere that was made entirely out of metal and where it'd be impossible for Bumi to earthbend. While unknown to them, on the level just below were 3 people and 4 guards, 2 following behind them and 2 in front. With one of them being Michi, the wife of the new governor of Amashu, Yukano, and their 2-year-old son Tom Tom being carried in her arms, while the third was their daughter Mai. Mai was a 15-year-old girl with fair skin, long black hair with some held in 2 small buns on either side of her head and 2 long strands that went over her shoulders, and tawny eyes. With her attire consisting of black, pointed shoes with the tips curving upward, a red robe with baggy sleeves, a black sash around her waist, a long maroon vest over it, and black fingerless gloves. "There really is no fathoming the depths of my hatred for this place," Mai stated in her usual emotionless and bored tone, along with her expression not changing at all. "Mai, your father was appointed governor. We're like royalty here. Be happy and enjoy it," said Michi, wondering why her daughter wasn't happy at having an entire city under their control, even better that it's one as important as Amashu. The group being unaware that 2 levels above them, several boulders were sitting in one of the mail delivery chutes, ready to be pushed down right towards them. With Mai rolling her eyes at her mother's words, finding it hard to enjoy being in a city where no one liked them, along with finding it boring and plain. "I thought my life was boring in the Fire Nation, but this place is unbearably bleak. Nothing ever happens," said Mai, finding she hated that part the most, that nothing ever happened and all she could do was be the perfect well-behaved daughter of the governor. On the level above them, the Gong were walking past them completely unnoticed before they stopped when they heard what sounded like stones rolling across the ground. Looking around, Aang's eyes widened when he saw 2 boulders rolling down one of the chutes. Before spotting Mai and her mother walking past, knowing if nothing was done they'd be crushed. Not caring if they were from the Fire Nation, Aang didn't hesitate to swing his staff the moment the boulders rolled past him. Unleashing a powerful blast of air that shattered the boulders, saving them, but also alerting them to the sound. With the guards tensing and held up the lanterns to see what the noise was, seeing the dust cloud created from the destroyed boulders. While Mai narrowed her eyes and saw Aang standing on the ledge, with the Avatar glancing down at them, realizing he just blew their cover. "The resistance," Michi said in worry, thinking it was an attack from the resistance, with Mai gaining a faint smile at now getting the chance to do something. Moving forward, Mai threw her hands out, launching multiple stilettos at Aang, who quickly jumped on top of a stack of wood, which the stilettos buried themselves into. with the gong quickly running away to avoid being caught, while two of the guards climbed up the ladders to chase after them. Stopping for a moment, Katara pulled some water out of her pouch and launched it at the guards, throwing them off the ledge. While Mai was able to get up to them and rushed at Katara, holding her hand out and launching more stilettos at the waterbender, causing Katara to quickly move the water in front of her and freeze it, with the stilettos burying themselves within the shield of ice, with Katara running after Aang and Sokka as Mai jumped over the ice shield and continuing pursuing them. Running past a scaffolding, Aang waited until Katara reached them before urging her to keep running, then waited until Mai was close enough. Once the ravinette was, Aang spun in the air and swung his staff down at the scaffolding with a sweep of wind, causing it to come crashing down between him and Mai. Gritting her teeth at seeing the scaffolding come down, Mai slipped one of her double-sided knives into her hand and threw it, having the knife ricochet off the wall towards Aang. But the Avatar, hearing the impact and seeing the knife coming towards him, before he quickly started spinning his staff as the knife impaled it, much to his surprise at how close it came to his head. Looking back at Mai on the other side of the collapsed scaffolding, Aang readied himself as she threw more knives at the group. Only for the ground to suddenly slide open underneath Aang, Katara, and Sokka, causing them to fall into the hole, before it was then sealed up as Mai's knives stabbed into the ground. Well, so much for that. Mai thought, sighing in disappointment at the chase ending before turning back to go check on her mother and brother to make sure they're alright. But Aang, Katara, Sokka, and Momo. Meanwhile, the gong landed in an underground tunnel, holding their heads and feeling disoriented the sudden drop. Before looking up to see themselves surrounded by citizens of Amashu and 3 soldiers standing in front of them, who looked ready to attack. "Whoa. Easy, we're on your side," Sokka said, holding his hands up only for the earthbenders to glare at them. "Your actions say it differently. You saved the governor's family when we were going to take them out," retorted the lead soldier, making Aang frown at him. "Of course I saved them. They were innocent people, and I wasn't just going to let them die," said Aang before raising his staff when the earthbender stomped his foot on the ground, causing several rocks to shoot up into the air. "Then that just means you're siding with the Fire Nation," the soldier said, with the other earthbenders getting to attack while Aang and Sokka got ready to defend themselves before Katara got between them. "Please, can we all just calm down? We are not with the Fire Nation. I'm Katara, this is my brother Sokka, and this Aang," said Katara, thinking they didn't know who they were if they were acting like this. "I know who you are," said the earthbender, cutting her off before reluctantly lowering the rocks while motioning the other earthbenders to do the same. "I'm Captain Young of Amashu's army and second in command of King Bumi, or at least I was until the Fire Nation captured the city. I've been working to expel them from Amashu, and we would have finally gotten an advantage against Governor Yukano by taking out his family if you hadn't interfered," Young said, narrowing his eyes at Aang, who flinched at the glare along with seeing how some of the other resistance members were looking at him. I couldn't just let them die, no matter who they are or where they came from," said Aang, only for Young to scoff before turning around and began walking down the tunnel. "Tell that to the people the Fire Nation are imprisoning for breaking their new laws, or those that can't even leave their homes anymore, with how they're basically turning the entire city into a giant prison. Make no mistake, I only had you 3 saved because of your friendship with King Bumi and how important the Avatar is to the war effort against the Fire Nation. Even if it seems you don't care to actually make an effort to strike back against them," retorted Young, making the Avatar flinch again at the accusations, not used to actually being hated like that, especially from those who support him. "Or used to, I guess," thought Aang, lowering his head, with Katara putting a hand on his shoulder before frowning at Young. "You can't blame Aang for wanting to help people, that's what the Avatar is supposed to do, and he has to master the other elements before he can do anything against the Fire Nation," Katara said in Aang's defense, with Sokka nodding in agreement. "Yeah, he's doing the best he can. And in case you haven't heard, he did help save the Northern Water Tribe and take out an entire fleet of Fire Nation ships," added Sokka, though mentally, he did somewhat agree with the resistance in wanting to drive the Fire Nation out of Amashu. If that meant needing to use a few dirty tactics, then maybe that's what was needed to get the job done if they were going to take down the Fire Nation. Though he didn't say it out loud, knowing how his sister and friend would react. "Oh, we've heard what happened, but it seems he's now refusing to utilize that same power to save Amashu as well, despite claiming to be a friend of King Bumi," Young retorted as they soon arrived in an underground cave filled with refugees they managed to save, with Aang flinching again. "So, is King Bumi with you guys? Is he leading the resistance?" questioned Aang, hoping to see a friendlier face here, only for the captain to clench his fists angrily. "Of course not. On the day of the invasion, we readied ourselves for battle. We were prepared to defend our city, to fight for our lives and for our freedom. But before we even had a chance, King Bumi surrendered," revealed Young, much to Aang's shock and concern that his friend would surrender without a fight. The day of the invasion, I asked King Bumi what he wanted to do. He looked me in the eye and said I'm going to do nothing. Nothing. King Bumi chose to surrender himself and the city to the Fire Nation. Young said in anger at Bumi choosing to surrender and let himself be taken prisoner rather than try fighting. It doesn't matter now, though. Fighting the Fire Nation is the only path to freedom. And if we die, then we'll make sure to take as many of them down with us," said Young, with the other resistance members nodding in agreement, making the Avatar lower his head sadly that they'd choose to die taking their enemies down with them, before perking up as he got an idea. "Actually, there's another path to freedom. You could leave Amashu. You're directing all your energy to fight the Fire Nation. But you're outnumbered. You can't win. Now's the time to retreat so you can live to fight another day," Ong said, knowing this way they'd be able to get out the city and better plan out how they'll fight the Fire Nation to take back Amashu. Hoping that even if they don't like him for thwarting their assassination attempt, they'd at least understand prioritizing the safety of the citizens over the city itself. "Absolutely not. You expect us to just abandon our home to let the Fire Nation win by driving us out?" demanded Young, angry at the idea of abandoning Amashu, with the other resistance members sharing his anger. "You already stopped us from damaging the governor's control over the city. Now you're trying to get us to leave," a resistance member said, also angry at Ong stopping their assassination attempt. "I bet the Avatar is working with the Fire Nation if he's so eager for us to just leave and let them take the city," said another resistance member. With Ong looking at them in shock and worry that they'd really refused to leave the city and think he was working with the Fire Nation. Flinching when he saw the refugees muttering amongst themselves, looking divided on the idea of getting to safety and refusing to leave Amashu. "Please. I don't want the Fire Nation here any more than any of you, but the important thing is making sure everyone is safe. You should at least want to get the civilians out of here so nothing happens to them," Ong said pleadingly, knowing if he can't convince everyone to leave, then he at least wanted to get the non-combatants out of the city. "Ong is right. Your first duty is to protect the citizens of Amashu. That means making sure they aren't inside the city where they can get hurt. If you want to stay and keep fighting the Fire Nation so badly, then fine. But the least you can do is help get them out." Katara said in agreement at getting the non-combatants out of the city. "It would give you the chance to focus entirely on the Fire Nation with the citizens safely out of the city. That way, there wouldn't be any worry of them getting caught in the middle of the fighting," Sokka added, knowing that's something that should help change their minds. Young frowned at this before looking over at the refugees, seeing how many of them weren't fighters and would be caught in the crossfire if nothing was done. "Fine. But that's still thousands of citizens that need to leave. How are we going to get them all out?" Young said, relenting to the compromise, but knew it wouldn't be easy to get all the non-combatants out of the city. "Suckers," declared Sokka with a grin, getting confused looks from everyone at what he meant. "You're all about to come down with a nasty case of pentapox," Sokka clarified, with Ong's and Katara's eyes widening in realization before smiling at what his plan was. Time skip one day. The next day, Sokka and Katara had managed to make all the citizens look like they were infected with pentapox after finding and gathering enough purple pentapieces. Before directing them to leave the city while acting sick, scaring away any guards in their way, who hastily had the gates open to let the infected people out of the city before they could be infected as well. But Long stayed behind to search for Bumi, along with being able to find and to free his pet goat gorilla Flopsy during the confusion. But the two searching the entire city for the rest of the day, only to fail to find where Bumi was located, leading to them sneaking out of the city to meet up with the evacuated citizens. Both of them feeling downcast at failing to find their friend before being greeted by Sokka and Katara when they arrived. "We looked everywhere. No Bumi," Ong said sadly, with Flopsy moaning sadly at not finding Bumi, while Katara hugged the Avatar and Sokka hugged the goat gorilla to cheer them up. "We've got a problem. We just did a head count," said Young, walking up to them, having followed them via a tunnel to ensure nothing went wrong, making the Gong look at him in worry. "Oh no. Did someone get left behind?" Katara asked, worried that someone got left behind during the evacuation. "No, we have an unwanted extra," Young replied, pointing to Momo as the Gong's eyes widening at seeing Tom Tom holding onto the flying lemur's neck. Later. After setting up a fire, the Gong kept Tom Tom with them, seeing how none of the refugees looked happy about a Fire Nation baby being with them. While Tom Tom kept trying to catch Momo, with the flying lemur quickly jumping away before Tom Tom's attention turned to Sokka's club. Falling down, the baby looked at curiously before picking it up and began suckling on it, only for Sokka to take it away. "No. Bad Fire Nation baby," Sokka scolded, refusing to let his weapons be used by anyone from the Fire Nation, with Tom Tom looking at him upset at having the club taken away before he began crying. Katara looked at the crying baby before narrowing her eyes at her brother and whacked him across the face, only for Sokka to cross his arms defiantly. "Hit me all you like, Katara, I'm not putting my weapons in the hands of anyone from the Fire Nation," stated Sokka, surprising the waterbender that he was going against her. "Here you go, little guy," said Aang, handing Tom Tom his staff, making the baby smile at having a new toy, with Katara smiling at the avatar before hugging Tom Tom. "Oh, you're so cute," Katara cooed before kissing his cheek. "Yeah, he's real cute. I'm sure he'll be so much cuter when he's older and joins the Fire Nation army, becoming a killer just like the rest of them," stated Young, knowing he'll be a killer like the rest of the Fire Nation. "Does that look like the face of a killer to you?" questioned Katara, picking Tom Tom up to show Young, knowing that he may be from the Fire Nation, but she doubted he would be like the rest of them. While the Earthbender looked at the baby indifferently, only seeing the soldier and killer he'll grow up to become. "I'm sure Fire Lord Sazin, Aslan and Ozai were all babies, and look at what they turned into. That kid won't be any different, just another killer in a long line of them," Young said, making Aang and Katara frown that he'd compare Tom Tom to the Fire Lords. Before their attention turned to the sky when they heard a shriek, seeing a messenger hawk flying towards them before landing on a rock. "The messenger hawk," Young said, tensing at the sight of the bird, wondering if it was a trap, with Aang going over and took the message from the hawk, unrolling it to see who it was from. "It's from the Fire Nation governor. He thinks we kidnapped his son. So he wants to make a trade. His son for King Bumi," said Aang, in shock that the governor would be willing to hand over Bumi in exchange for his son, with the others being shocked as well. "You're kidding, right? They'd hand over a powerful earthbending king for a baby," Sokka said in disbelief that they'd make such a trade before wincing when Katara smacked him again. "Sokka. It's not just a baby, it's his son. Of course the governor would do anything to get him back," Katara said before turning back to Aang. "Are you going to take the deal?" questioned Katara, with the avatar immediately nodding as he was already writing a reply. "Of course I'm going to. The governor wants his son back and we're not just going to keep as a hostage or anything. And this way we also get Bumi back, both sides will get what they want," Aang replied as went and gave the reply to the messenger hawk, which took off back to Amashu. "I don't agree with bargaining with the Fire Nation, but as long as they hand over King Bumi, they can take the kid back," said Young, only caring about retrieving Bumi while also seeing this as their chance to deal with the Fire Nation invaders as well, a chance he wasn't going to pass up. Time skip one day. Amashu. The next day Naruto, Azula, Ty Lee, June and several members of Naruto's forces had arrived in Amashu to recruit Mai, as well as meet with Governor Yukano. With Azula being annoyed when Naruto had stopped her from being carried on her palanquin. "I don't understand why I should waste time walking when I have a palanquin for a reason," Azula said in annoyance at needing to walk. "Because it's a waste of time and energy to carry something like that around. And on the more practical side, it lets you be more aware of your surroundings and prepared in the event of an attack," replied Naruto, making the Fire Princess scowl in annoyance. "Lighten up, princess, you should enjoy the exercise more. We wouldn't want to have to squeeze you into your wedding dress, now would we?" June said with a smirk, with Azula glaring murderously at her. "Did you just call me fat?" demanded Azula, wishing she could create lightning to vaporize her, while the bounty hunter shrugged nonchalantly. "You said it, not me. Though now that you mention it," said June, trailing off, with Azula growling lowly. "I don't think she's fat. The Whittle princess is just used to being carried around like a Whittle baby," one of the soldiers said in a mocking baby voice, making Azula turn to them while seeing who spoke, one of the few soldiers Naruto brought that stood out. With it being a 17-year-old girl with fair skin, short black hair and distinctly pink eyes, which are accentuated by her eyelashes running upwards at the corners. The girl wearing custom green and black armor, showing she's one of the earthbenders in Naruto's army, with the armor also having painted red cracks on it that looked to glow in certain light. Having learned the girl's name was Kuritsuchi, one of the captains in Naruto's forces and a skilled earthbender, at least from what Azula's heard. Along with seeming to never pass up a chance to taunt people or make sarcastic remarks. Something that grated on the Fire Princess's nerves whenever she targeted her. The only other soldiers that really stood out was another earthbender named Chimjai Akimichi, as well as two waterbenders named Ino Yamanaka and Hakuyuki. The latter two having rather unique looks for waterbenders, as both of them have fair skin, with Ino also having light blue eyes and platinum blonde hair, while Haku has black hair and brown eyes. And despite her prejudice against earthbenders and waterbenders, Azula has managed to observe their training a few times and would, begrudgingly, admit they were rather skilled. "Kuritsuchi," Naruto said while looking at the earthbender sternly, with the pink-eyed soldier raising her hands in surrender, though gave Azula one last smirk. But the group soon arriving at the palace, where Mai stood to greet them, bowing slightly to Azula. "Please tell me you're here to kill me," Mai said hopefully, before gaining a slight smile when she looked at Azula, only to lose it at seeing her current state. The Fire Princess looking better after the circus show and Ty Lee's own performance, she still looked tired and drained of energy. along with feeling that her inner fire was still dwindling despite her efforts to regain her bending's former strength. Mai and Azula soon laughed at her remark and hugged each other. "It's great to see you, Mai," Azula said sincerely, getting a raised brow from the knife thrower before hugging Ty Lee as well when she rushed forward. "I thought you ran off and joined the circus. You said it was your calling," said Mai, not expecting to see Ty Lee leave the circus after running away from home. "Well, I thought it was time for a career change and I wasn't going to miss the chance to see my best friends again," Ty Lee replied, happy that they're all together again. "Right. General Naruto," Mai said while nodding towards Naruto, who returned it. "A pleasure to meet you. I've heard about you from Azula and Ty Lee on the way here, along with your skills in using knives. Though if you don't mind me asking, why does it seem like the city is abandoned?" Naruto asked, having noticed how empty Amashu was on the way to the palace. "Everyone got sick with some dumb disease called pentapox, and my dad had them all removed from the city. But apparently it was just a cover and the resistance here kidnapped my little brother," replied Mai, making Naruto frown while Azula scowled in annoyance. "All of you spread out and search the city. Meet back here once you've finished searching," Naruto ordered while turning to his soldiers, wanting them to get a good layout of the city and see where this resistance was hiding, with all of them bowing before they began spreading throughout the city. "Take us to your parents," Azula said, annoyed at the governor basically emptying the city of potential hostages, leaving them vulnerable to attacks. Later, Mai had taken them into the palace throne room, with Azula taking the throne of Amashu for herself and waited until Yukano and Michi arrived, having them explain what happened and how the plague had appeared within the city. "I apologize. You've come to Amashu at a difficult time. At noon we're making a trade with the resistance to get Tom Tom back," Yukano said, having not expected the Fire Princess and a High General to arrive, otherwise he would have put together a proper welcome. "Yes, I'm sorry to hear about your son. But really, what did you expect by just letting all the citizens leave?" said Azula before standing up and glaring at the governor. "My father has trusted you with this city and you're making a mess of things," Azula said, with Yukano and Michi bowing lowly to the Ravenet. "Forgive me, princess," said Yukano, with Naruto putting a hand on Azula's shoulder and stepped forward. "Let this be a lesson for yourself and your men, governor. If you all had actually taken the time to look into things, you'd know that there is no such thing as pentapox. Which doesn't even sound real, with a foolish name like that," Naruto stated, with Yukano nodding. "Yes, General Naruto. I swear I'll not fall for such tricks again," Yukano replied, only to lower his head again when Azula stepped forward. "If you remain in power for that long, because of your foolishness, the city is now empty and the resistance here will be free to attack without concern," stated Azula, only to be pulled back again by Naruto. "But it's also understandable that you haven't learned everything there is to know about Amashu and its surrounding land, leaving you unaware if such a disease did in fact exist. I've encountered enemy resistances and rebellions that also utilized such tactics, faking an illness in order to sneak around uninterrupted or causing chaos among their enemies they've infected. So I'm sure you'll strive to study up on the lands you govern so such a thing doesn't happen again," added Naruto, with Yukano quickly nodding in agreement, thankful the High General was being more forgiving than the Fire Princess. "As for the hostage exchange, you, your wife and Mai will handle it. While Azula, June, Ty Lee and myself will join you to ensure no further tricks happen. My forces and your guards will also be on standby in the event the resistance tries going back on the agreement," Naruto said, much to Yukano's and Michi's gratitude and relief at having helped to get their son back. Plus with the resistance's willingness to try and assassinate Mai, Michi and Tom Tom, simply to get at Yukano. And how they would be dead if it hadn't been for the Avatar's interference, given how Mai said he was able to knock over a scaffolding by just swinging a staff, showing he's an airbender. It made Naruto rather concerned if they might try another attack during the exchange. "One last order of business. There is no more Amashu. I'm renaming it in honor of my father, the city of New Ozai," said Azula with a smirk, pleased at the new name of the city. "We're not renaming Amashu, let alone renaming it something that stupid," Naruto immediately said, making the Ravenet's head snap towards him. "Why not?" Azula demanded in annoyance. "For starters, it's pointless to rename the city when Amashu is just fine," Naruto stated, with the others nodding in agreement. "New Oz-I also sounds kind of egocentric. I mean, a comet is understandable since that's done almost all the time, but a city," added Ty Lee, also not wanting the city named after the Fire Lord. "And like Foxy said, it's a stupid name. Not to mention unoriginal, honestly princess, try to be a little more creative," June stated with a mocking smirk. "Azula, I already hated the city, please don't give me another reason to hate it even more," said Mai, not thinking she could hate Amashu any more than she already did, but if it was called New Oz-I, then she'd be tempted to throw herself into the gorge around it. I actually rather like the name Amashu and the history behind it, it's a rather romantic tale. Michi said nervously disagreeing with the Fire Princess, but couldn't say New Ozai was a good name. Forgive me princess, but it is rather lackluster for such a grand city and one of the last Earth Kingdom strongholds. Said Yukano as even with his loyalty to Ozai, he couldn't say it was a good name either. Alright. Fine, the city will remain Amashu. Azula said, crossing her arms while looking away in embarrassment at how no one thought the new name was good, while considering it unimaginative and lackluster. I believe that's everything. We'll meet up again when it's time for the hostage exchange. Said Naruto, taking mercy on his fiancée and dismissing everyone, with Yukano, Michi and Jun all taking their leave, leaving Naruto, Azula, Ty Lee and Mai. But the knife thrower looking at her friends and the high general with a raised brow, upon seeing how close Naruto and Azula seemed to be. Given how Mai knew if anyone else had spoken against Azula, they would be incinerated on the spot. So, mind telling me why you are all here to begin with? And what's wrong with you? Mai asked, looking at Azula, who frowned in annoyance. A lot's happened. Muttered Azula as she tried creating a fireball in her hand, surprising Mai upon seeing her fire wasn't blue anymore and how quickly it fizzled out. The trio began filling Mai in on everything that happened, mostly Naruto and Azula, while Ty Lee told her about when they recruited her from the circus, along with the show she put on for the Fire Princess. Which Azula furiously denied enjoying or that she even wanted to see it at all. Surprising Mai once again at seeing that Azula wasn't even being serious, being able to tell she seemed to genuinely appreciate what they did for her. Not thinking she'd ever see her friend acting like this, even more so that she's engaged to Naruto. Though Mai did feel upset at the Fire Lord for what he's done to Azula, as despite how she acted and treated them at times, Azula was still their friend. And despite her own emotionless and stoic personality, Mai did want to try and help her. So, you're hunting the Avatar. Mai stated once they told her the reason they came to Amashu. That's right, and both of you have the skills we could use to capture him. Replied Azula, with Mai immediately nodding. Count me in. Anything to get me out of this place. But we can leave after my brother's safe. Said Mai, eager for the chance to get out of Amashu, but wanted to wait until her brother was safe. That's acceptable. And something tells me, we won't have time to capture the Avatar here, once the trade has been made, they'll likely have an escape planned when they have King Bumi back. Naruto said, with the girls nodding in agreement, though Azula was annoyed that they wouldn't be able to capture the Avatar today. Later. Once it came time for the hostage exchange, Naruto, Azula, Ty Lee, Mai, Jun, Yukano and Michi headed up to the almost finished statue of Fire Lord Ozai, which was surrounded by scaffolding, where the exchange would take place. With several guards and Naruto's forces being around the area, staying out of sight and waiting for any sign of treachery. With Aang, Katara and Sokka already waiting for them with the latter holding Tom Tom, allowing Aang and Katara the chance to jump into action if this was a trick. The trio tensing as they looked at Jun with wide eyes. It's the crazy bounty hunter that was working with Zuko. Said Sokka, not expecting to see Jun here as well. What are you doing here? Are you trying to capture us again? Katara demanded, narrowing her eyes at the woman, while remembering how she used her necklace to track them. You kiddies can relax, I'm not after you today, anyway. Can't say anything about tomorrow, or maybe an hour from now. You did hurt my precious Nyla, and I'm known to hold a grudge. Jun said while putting a hand on her whip before scowling in annoyance. That's without counting getting paralyzed and having to deal with creepy Uncle Lazy, acting like a pervert and hitting on me the entire time, until it wore off. Even longer when he kept pretending to be paralyzed. So, I can say you're pretty high on my shit list right now. Added Jun, also upset at having to deal with Iroh holding her the entire time and trying to flirt with her. The latter comment making Naruto and Azula cover their faces in embarrassment at what Iroh had done. The man who would have been Fire Lord and called the Dragon of the West, I don't even know why I bother anymore. Azula thought, embarrassed at what her uncle had done. Are all wise old men secretly perverts? Because so far, I've found nothing to disprove it. Said Naruto, pinching the bridge of his nose while the gong looked sheepish at the part about Iroh. Along with Aang and Katara thinking about Gyatso and Pakku from Naruto's statement before furiously shaking their heads, not wanting to think about it. Enough of this. Have you brought my son? Said Yukano, wanting to make sure they brought Tom Tom, with Aang nodding as Sokka stepped forward and showed them Tom Tom. Tom Tom? Michi said in relief, wanting to run forward and grab her son, but restrained herself. He's here. We're ready to trade. Aang replied, with Yukano nodding before motioning the crane operator with a metal coffin-like cage being lowered down, as the gong heard a familiar laughter and snort. Hi, everybody. Said Bumi, the cage turned revealing only his face was uncovered, showing his large grin, with Aang smiling in relief at seeing his friend, while Naruto narrowed his eyes at the king. This guy's either as crazy as they say or he's using neutral Jing. thought Naruto, realizing why Bumi had surrendered the city and himself without a fight. He was waiting for the perfect moment to strike that wouldn't end in the city being damaged or his people dying. I'll give him one thing, he's a mad genius. Naruto thought, feeling great respect for Bumi since he had no way of knowing he'd even be spared or executed, yet took the risk anyway. I'm sorry, but a thought just occurred to me. Do you mind? Azula said once Bumi was lowered to the ground, making everyone look at her. What is it, Princess Azula? Said Michi in worry, hoping she didn't do anything that'd stop them from getting their son back. We're trading a 2-year-old for a king. A powerful, earthbending king. Stated Azula while looking at Bumi, who nodded his head in agreement with a grin before Naruto put a hand on her shoulder. I know what you're trying to do and we're going through with the exchange. Naruto said sternly, making the fire princess narrow her eyes at him. You really want to just hand over a powerful earthbender to the Avatar? Why not just start training him yourself then? Azula retorted, not believing he'd want to go through with the trade, even if it meant the Avatar would be getting such a powerful earthbender as his teacher. Azula, if you can't keep your word, then no one will ever believing anything you have to say. And I always keep my word. So be quiet. Said Naruto, with Azula looking at him in annoyance, but relented and motioned Yukano and Michi to continue the trade, much to their relief. Is there a problem? Aang asked, worried at what was going on. No. No problem, you'll return our son to us, then we shall turn King Bumi over to you. Said Yukano as he and Michi walked forward, with the gong doing the same. But before they could get close enough to return Tom, several large boulders were launched into the air towards them, much to everyone's shock. Before Aang quickly swung his staff, releasing a blast of wind that destroyed the boulders, only for more to appear. What's the meaning of this? We had a deal. Yukano said, quickly grabbing his wife and moving back to avoid being hit by the boulders. This isn't us. Katara said quickly, shaking her head that they were involved before their eyes widened as Young and the rest of the resistance lit up on large stone platforms with several boulders on them, much to everyone's horror. Uramashu and King Bumi. Young cried out as he and the resistance began launching boulders at the Fire Nation group, who all moved out of the way. No. No, not for King Bumi. King Bumi wants you all to stop right now. Said Bumi, shaking his head at his men, not wanting them to do this. Captain Young. Stop this, we were going to get Bumi back. Aang said, jumping in front of Young and his men, only for his eyes to widen when they launched boulders at him as well. The Avatar has betrayed us. Take him down along with the rest of the Fire Nation scum. Said Young, thrusting his fist forward, launching a boulder at Aang who opened up his glider and flew into the air to avoid it. We've been betrayed. Naruto shouted before launching a blast of fire into the air, the signal to the guards and his forces to attack, with the guards rushing out and unleashing jets of fire at the resistance. Not believing what's happening, Aang flew into the air towards Bumi's cage as it was being lifted into the air, still wanting to at least save his friend. Only to cry out when a wave of fire blocked him, before freaking out when he saw Naruto propelling himself towards him. The High General flipping in the air, releasing an arc of flames at the Avatar, forcing him to fly away to avoid them, with Naruto pursuing him. Mom, Dad. Get somewhere safe, now. Said Mai, throwing some knives at the resistance members pinning them down, before she and Ty Lee rushed towards Katara and Sokka to get Tom, while Yukano and Michi nodded before they ran to hide by the scaffolding. Same goes to you, Princess. I don't think Foxy would be happy if you died. Nyla. June called out while grabbing her whip before whistling, with Nyla leaping up from a lower level, roaring as he tackled some resistance members before striking them with his tongue, paralyzing them. With June cracking her whip at an earthbender when they tried attacking her Shirshu, wrapping her whip around their neck before pulling them in close, slamming her foot into their head. Before pulling out several Shirshu spit darts and threw them at more members of the resistance, paralyzing them as well. I hate this. Azula thought, scowling as she was forced to stay back, knowing she can't do much without her bending. We've got to get the baby out of here. Katara said to Sokka, not wanting the baby to get hurt with all the fighting going on around them, while Sokka was blowing on the bison whistle to call Appa. Way ahead of ya. Replied Sokka before blowing the whistle again, while keeping Tom from trying to grab it. Katara and Sokka then started running to the edge as Mai and Ty Lee ran after them, the Ravenet launching several stilettos at the siblings. With Katara quickly pulling water out of her pouch, breaking a few wooden boards, and lifted them into the air, blocking the stilettos from piercing her face. Before launching the boards at Mai, only to notice that Ty Lee was gone. Looking back, the waterbender's eyes widened when she saw her brother trip and go skidding across the ground, coming close to falling off the ledge. With Ty Lee jumping up from a lower level, having struck Sokka in his foot to trip him, the acrobat then running towards him to get Tom. Only to cry out when Katara wrapped her water whip around her leg, pulling her back. Giving Sokka time to get back up and ran to a ladder to climb down. Tom. Michi cried out in worry at seeing her son being taken away, not caring about the danger as she ran to get him. "Michi. Don't go out there," said Yukano, running after his wife, fearful of her getting injured or worse. Only for his eyes to widen as he saw more boulders being launched into the air, the governor quickly running and grabbing his wife, pulling her back towards the scaffolding. "No. Let go, we have to get Tom Tom before they screamed Michi when one of the boulders crashed through the scaffolding, forcing the couple to keep moving as more boulders crashed down around them. The two looking around fearfully as they had to keep changing the direction they were going as more boulders crashed down around them. Before their eyes widened as the scaffolding started coming down from the damage to it, crying out when a metal bar fell on top of them. Which got Mai's attention, the girl's eyes widening when she saw her parents pinned down under the collapsing scaffolding. "Mom. Dad." Mai shouted, rushing to go and help them, only to be forced to jump back when a resistance member launched a boulder at her before stomping on the ground, creating stone pillar that rushed towards the knife thrower. Jumping out of the way, Mai launched several stilettos at the resistance member, pinning them to the ground before turning back towards her parents. Only for her eyes to widen in horror as the scaffolding completely fell down, right on top of them. "No." Screamed Mai in horror at her parents being crushed, with the fighting momentarily stopping from the sudden crash. The Fire Nation sighed and Gong looking in shock and horror at what just happened, with Tom Tom crying out in Sokka's arms, tears in his eyes, and trying to reach out to where his parents were. "Oh man." Sokka muttered, not believing what just happened, with Katara covering her mouth in horror. No-one muttered in horror, not wanting this to happen. "We did it, man. The governor is dead, now it's time to drive the rest of the Fire Nation from Ga." Young said to rally the resistance members only to cry out when a knife was buried in his shoulder, with Mai glaring at him murderously with tears in her eyes. "You want the city so much then you can die in it," exclaimed Mai while throwing multiple knives at Young and the resistance members, everyone being aimed at their heads, throats or hearts, most of them finding their mark and killing several resistance members, while others were lucky to get out of the way. "Katara. We need to," Sokka said, knowing they needed to get out of here more than ever, only to be cut off when he was suddenly ensnared by several water tendrils, with one grabbing Tom Tom, pulling him towards one of Naruto's waterbenders, much to Katara's shock at seeing waterbenders. "What? Waterbenders, what are they?" said Katara, only to be forced to raise a shield of ice when dozens of ice spikes were launched at her by Haku. "Get the baby out of here, now." Haku ordered the waterbender, who nodded before creating a wave of water to ride away with Tom Tom. "What are you doing? We're on your side," Katara said, not believing they were being attacked by waterbenders, only for Haku to wave her arms pulling water out of the air and freezing it into ice claws on her fingers which she launched at Katara. "Yet you broke your end of the deal, and now Governor Yukano and his wife are dead. I don't see how any of you are on my side," stated Haku, much to Katara's shock before she moved out of the way of the ice claws. "You're with the Fire Nation, but they destroyed the Southern Water Tribe, attacked the Northern Water Tribe, tried to kill the Moon Spirit," said Katara, launching a water whip at Haku, only for her to pull more water from the air, creating several water rings that sliced through her water whip. "All of which was done by men who are now dead," Haku retorted before creating several ice spears she launched to Katara, with the southern waterbender creating an ice shield, blocking the spears. "The Fire Nation is still evil. They've been trying to control the world for 100 years, just look at what they did to Amashu," Katara argued, only to gasp when a water tendril wrapped around her neck from behind and slammed her into the ground. "Yet you're the ones that betrayed us. You were going to get King Bumi back, but instead you attacked us. Now that baby you seemed so eager to protect is an orphan along with his sister. I think you're confusing who's evil here. And for the record, General Naruto's treated us with nothing but kindness, respect, and fairness. All of which we've returned and have no intention of betraying," said Ino before rotating her hands and sent Katara skidding across the ground. Getting up, Katara looked at the two waterbenders nervously, with Haku forming ice needles in between her fingers, while Ino covered her arms in water that split into multiple tendrils. But before they could attack, Katara gasped in pain when she was struck several times in her back and her arms, knocking her back, showing Ty Lee behind her. "That was for Mai," Ty Lee said as she glared at Katara, who quickly tried creating a water whip only to be terrified when she saw she couldn't bend. Moving out of the way when Ino stabbed her water tendrils down where she was, Katara began running as quickly as she could, knowing she's helpless against them without her bending. Meanwhile, the resistance members were now being pushed back as Mai didn't let up and taking them down with her knives and stilettos. Along with pulling out her foldable sai and stabbing any earthbenders that got too close. The Ravenet not letting up and killing as many of the resistance members as she could. "She's just one girl. Attack her all at once," Young shouted, rallying the resistance before they all stomped on the ground, creating several stone pillars. The earthbenders punched the pillars, launching multiple earth discs at Mai, who ducked and dodged around them while still throwing her knives and stilettos. Only to grit her teeth when one of the discs connected with her shoulder, feeling it dislocate her arm. With the resistance members doubling their efforts, breaking the pillars down and unleashing a barrage of rock fragments at Mai. But before the fragments could hit Mai, a massive boulder fell down in front of her blocking them, with the boulder then suddenly began spinning around. The sight shocking the resistance members before they were forced to move out of the way when the boulder began launching rocks at them. Only for the boulder to start chasing them down and continue launching rocks that shattered bones on impact. Before suddenly, someone burst out of the boulder into the air, letting out a shout as they descended and slammed their fists down on the boulder. The impact caused the boulder to explode, unleashing a hail of rocks at the resistance members. But the person being revealed to be Chimjai, who slammed his fists into the ground, pulling them back up, showing they were now covered in large rocks gauntlets. "Come on. I'll take you all down." Chimjai shouted, swinging his fists around, releasing rock spikes at the resistance members. An earthbender said, young in shock and disbelief, with the rest of the resistance also being shocked that an earthbender was working with the Fire Nation, before several resistance members fell to the ground as several earth pillars shot up and slammed into the side of their heads. "He's not the only one," Kuritsuchi said, emerging from the ground before stomping on the ground and creating several earth spikes that shot up towards the resistance members. "Sorry we're late, we needed to take care of your friends down below and keep them from launching any more boulders," said Kuritsuchi with a smirk, having dealt with the earthbenders that were launching the boulders into the air. "You traitors. You'd side with the Fire Nation after everything they've done to the Earth Kingdom." Young yelled in anger that they'd sided with the Fire Nation before grunting in pain when Chimjai launched one of his stone gauntlets at the captain's back. "You're the traitors. Going back on the deal when you were going to get your king back," retorted Chimjai while creating another gauntlet, with Kuritsuchi stomping her foot on the ground lifting up several rocks. "You could have all just left the city peacefully, but you just had to double-cross us. Now everyone here that dies, it'll be on your heads. But unlike you, we don't betray our comrades, and right now, the general wants you to burn," said Kuritsuchi as her smirk widened before she began grinding the rocks together, with the resistance members being shocked when the rocks were heated until they turned into lava, which Kuritsuchi morphed into several shuriken. Before the lavabender launched her shurikens at the resistance members, who quickly raised a stone shield, only for the lava shurikens to slice through it and them. With Kuritsuchi then slamming her hands on the ground, causing an eruption of lava that rushed towards the resistance members. The pink-eyed soldier smirking as they were forced to run to avoid the approaching lava. While Chimjai curled up into a ball and covered himself in another boulder, rolling after the resistance members. "You good?" Kuritsuchi asked while looking at Mai, who held her shoulder before grunting as she slammed it into one of the earth pillar, popping it back into the socket. "I will be once they're all dead," stated Mai, pulling out her knives and rushed after the resistance members. At another part of the platform, June was now riding on Nyla, throwing several darts at resistance members to paralyze them. Or wrapping her whip around them and throwing them against the walls, or pulling them in close to knock them out. While Nyla ripped apart any rocks thrown at them with his claws before striking the resistance members with his tongue to paralyze them. "Come on Nyla. I want to take as many of these guys down before Knife Girl there kills everyone," June said with a smirk, eager to incapacitate and capture the earthbenders before Mai can kill them, knowing each of them would fetch a nice price. Up above the fighting, Aang looked down in shock, despair and horror at seeing people dying on both sides, having not wanted any of this to happen. Before the Avatar cried out when he was hit by a blast of fire, sending him crashing into the scaffolding. But Aang quickly righting himself and skidded across the platform, seeing Naruto floating in the air before cutting off his flames, creating 2 fire whips as he walked towards Aang. "Please, I didn't know this would happen," Aang said before releasing a blast of air when Naruto launched one of the whips at him, slicing through the wood. "I thought air nomads were peaceful and didn't tell lies, but I suppose being the Avatar makes you an exception," retorted Naruto, swinging the second whip at Aang, cutting through the wood and metal framing. "I'm not lying. We had no idea Captain Young intended to attack. Please just listen, we can end this before anyone else dies," pleaded Aang, only to bend backwards as a whip came dangerously close to taking his head off. "Yeah, we can end this. Just know, we were going to give you King Bumi, now you'll see what I do to liars and traitors," Naruto said before having the fire whip shrunk down until there were mini fireballs in each of his hands. The whiskered firebender throwing his hands forward, unleashing 2 explosions of fire that rushed towards Aang, whose eyes widened before he began spinning his staff to keep the flames back. Before Naruto propelled himself above the explosions, launching himself at Aang with his hand held back with a firebomb in his hand. The Avatar quickly inhaled deeply before releasing a powerful gust of wind to his side, launching himself away. Just in time as Naruto slammed his hand down on the platform, releasing a massive explosion of fire that incinerated the scaffolding platforms and melted the metal frames down below. Though Aang was shocked when Naruto dragged his hand across the platform before thrusting his arm up, creating pillars of flames heading towards him. Opening up his glider, Aang quickly flew into the air, with Naruto shooting fire out of his hands and feet, flying after the Avatar. Shooting multiple fireballs after Aang, the Avatar closed his glider for a moment and turned around, swinging the staff releasing a wave of compressed air that cut through the fireballs. With Naruto flipping over it, swinging his legs at Aang, and releasing arcs of flames at him. With Aang rotating his arms as he compressed the air around him, forming an air sphere as the flames hit and dispersed on impact. Seeing this, Naruto increased the power of flames from his hands and feet, propelling himself at high speed towards Aang, before maneuvering himself to start flying around the Avatar. Aang's eyes widening as Naruto began leaving behind a trail of flames around him, flying faster and faster until he stopped in front of Aang and gathered the fire into a large pressurized ball. With the High General giving a shout as he launched the fireball at Aang. With the Avatar inhaling deeply and absorbing his air sphere before unleashing a powerful gale force winds. The attacks colliding together, with the fireball releasing a massive explosion of flames, the sight shocking Aang at the large amount of fire. Before he began free-falling until he opened up his glider, looking back to see Naruto chasing after him, making the Avatar nervous as he began flying faster. Back on the ground, Azula had moved away from the fighting, looking around in shock at everything happening, those dying on either side. Along with Mai not hesitating in killing the resistance members after her parents were crushed. Having never thought the battlefield could be this chaotic and dangerous. Looking around, the Fire Princess saw Mai still cutting down resistance members without hesitation, while June and Nile were paralyzing or knocking out any in their way, and Naruto's forces were taking down even more. Wait, where's Ty Lee? Thought Azula, looking around for any sign of the Kai blocker, mentally sighing in relief at seeing her busy Kai blocking more earthbenders while flipping around and avoiding their attacks. Only for her eyes to widen when she spotted an earthbender lifting up a boulder and aiming it right at Ty Lee, while her back is turned. The Ravenet not even thinking before she ran to get her friend out of the way, only for the resistance member to launch the boulder at Ty Lee, making Azula afraid that she was going to be hit. Ty Lee. Azula shouted, getting the brunette's attention, with Ty Lee looking at her in surprise before her eyes widened at the shadow behind her, turning to see the boulder flying towards her, not having time to avoid it entirely. The sight now terrifying Azula, knowing she'd be hit and crushed by the rock, something that scared her even more, not wanting to see her be hurt or killed. Remembering the show she'd put on just for her, promising that she'd be there for her from now on. And now this earthbender thought that they could kill her. Acting on instinct, Azula tried shooting fire out of her hands and feet to propel herself towards Ty Lee, not even having time to be shocked as blue flames shot out of her. The Fire Princess getting in front of the acrobat, shocked Ty Lee at seeing her fire, before holding her hand out with her index and middle finger extended. Unleashing a blast of fire that shattered the boulder, with Azula then manipulating the flames into a pinwheel she launched at the earthbender. The wheel of fire slicing the resistance member right down the middle. Azula, your fire, it's backhand and you saved me, Ty Lee said in shock that not only Azula's fire was back, but that she'd saved her as well. Of course I did. The only one who gets to push you around is me, let alone these fools. Retorted Azula while holding up her hand, smirking eagerly at the familiar blue flames. Before swiping her arms up through the air, releasing a wave of fire at a group of resistance members, incinerating them on the spot. Now they'll see what real firebending is. Thought Azula, pleased at having her fire back. Meanwhile, Young could only look around helplessly, angry and worried at how badly the battle was going for them, knowing if something isn't done soon, then they would all end up dead or captured. Men. Take out the ground beneath them. We'll bury them all within a Mashu. Young said, gathering up most of the still standing resistance members as they ran to get some higher ground. Going up to the level above the battle, the earthbenders all jumped up before stomping on the ground, thrusting their arms forward before throwing them back. Causing the ground to begin shaking, before they stomped on the ground again to start breaking open the level everyone was on. Just a little more. Said Young, knowing the ground would break open any moment now, before they slammed their fists down on the ground, causing a mini earthquake. Only for everyone to stop when they heard a creaking sound, before looking up in horror at seeing the statue of Ozai had been destabilized and was now falling down straight towards them. Everyone, move now. Naruto shouted to his forces, as they all quickly began scattering. Katara. Yelled Sokka from on top of Appa, having been able to slip away to get to the bison before flying low and pulled his sister up, knowing they needed to escape. Aang. We need to go now. Katara said, looking up at Aang, the Avatar looking at her before looking back at the collapsing statue, his eyes widening in terror at seeing Yumi's cage was right in its path. No. Ong shouted, quickly flying at Yumi, refusing to let his friend be crushed, only to cry out when a rock hit him in the side, knocking him down to the ground. Looking up, Ong could only look in horror as the statue collapsed on top of his friend's cage, much to the horror of the rest of the gang and resistance. "Yumi!" cried Ong, rushing forward to the Rekage, hoping and begging that he somehow survived, while Young fell to his knees in shock and horror. What have I done? I didn't mean for this to happen." Young muttered in horror and despair, realizing what he's become in his desperation to take back Amashu, only to end up getting his king killed. Before he was struck by Nyla's tongue as Jun and Ty Lee took out the rest of his men, the two looking at the Rekage with frowns on their faces. "What a funking waste," muttered Jun, unable to help but feel pity as Ong ran towards the Rekage and began blowing it away. "Bumi. Bumi. Bumi. Come on Bumi, say something. Anything. Please." Ong begged, searching for where his friend was, refusing to believe he was dead. Only to freeze as he blew away some debris, the Avatar shaking as he fell to his knees when he saw a bloodied hand sticking up from it. "No. Ong cried out with tears in his eyes, seeing that the only living friend he had left was now dead. Though soon Ong's sadness, pain and despair turned into pure rage and anger as his tattoos began glowing, his head snapping back towards everyone else, showing his glowing tear-filled eyes. Before Ong began floating into the air with hurricane force winds blowing around him. With an air sphere forming around him followed by a tornado wrapping around the enraged Avatar. Until Ong threw his arm out, unleashing a giant pressurized blast of air that ripped through the ground and anyone in its path, while those within close proximity were sent flying through the air. Throwing his other arm out, Ong released another blast of air at his other side, taking out even more people and sending others flying. Before he began rotating his arms, causing the tornado to spin faster and faster until he raised his arm into the air, with the tornado going up as well. Ong then sliced his arm down, causing the tornado to turn and head straight towards the ground, slamming into it, crushing, and destroying everything it hit or was close to. With everyone quickly running to get as far away as they could from the Avatar, seeing he was attacking both the Amashu resistance and those affiliated with the Fire Nation alike. Though Ong's rampage was stopped when Naruto fired a blast of fire at him, with Ong moving his hand and increasing the pressure of the wind from where the fire was coming from. Turning his head to glare at Naruto, who shot more fireballs at him, the Avatar merely swinging his arm out and releasing a wave of wind that cut through the flames. Propelling himself out of the way, Naruto flew around Ong, shooting more and more fireballs at the Avatar, until Ong flew after him. Being able to reach Naruto by negating the wind resistance on him, before slicing his arms through the air, releasing several air blades at the High General. With Naruto immediately shooting himself off to the side, narrowly dodging the air blades. But the whiskered firebender spinning in the air until he was facing Ong, thrusting his fist forward, creating a flame at the end of fist, releasing an explosive burst of fire at Ong. The explosion managing to throw Ong out of his air sphere and back to the ground, with Naruto acting quickly and flew after him. Landing on the ground, Naruto began propelling himself around Ong as fast as he could, augmenting his flames as they began growing hotter and more intense. Until soon a massive fire vortex was swirling around the Avatar. Naruto taking a moment to look at his flames, surprised when he saw hints of purple and green in the vortex. What though was that, Naruto thought before quickly shaking his head and focused back on the enraged Avatar. With Ong scowling before he began spinning around at high speed, forming a cocoon of wind around himself, which continued growing bigger and bigger until it turned into a tornado. As the Avatar then flew up before diving right back down on the ground, slamming his hand down. The impact causing the wind to disperse into a massive hurricane, which also dispersed the fiery vortex around him. With Naruto having gotten out of the way when he saw Ong jump up, managing to avoid being hit by the blast. Before the High General began rotating his arms, creating trails of lightning just as Ong turned his attention back towards him. Thrusting his hand forward, Naruto fired a blast of lightning at the Avatar's feet, throwing him through the air before catching himself. But before Ong could attack Naruto again, he grunted as he was struck several times in the back and fell to the ground, his tattoos losing their glow with Ty Lee looking down at him in shock and disbelief. "Did I just take down the Avatar?" Ty Lee said, not expecting her Kai blocking to work on the Avatar when he was in the Avatar state. The Kai blocker yelped when Naruto propelled himself forward, grabbing the brunette just as Appa landed on ground, bellowing loudly at everyone. While Sokka and Katara hastily grabbed Ong before climbing back onto the bison. "Go, go, 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 go. Yip, now." Sokka shouted, grabbing the reins and urging Appa to fly off, with the sky bison shooting up into the air and flew away. Later. The battle ended with great losses on both sides, with the resistance, guards, and soldiers all being nearly wiped out, while the resistance members still alive were rounded up. With the remaining guards and soldiers being tended to and collecting the bodies of the fallen. While Naruto looked at all the destruction mournfully, having hoped this wouldn't happen, let alone on a scale like this. Before looking over his shoulder at Azula, June and Ty Lee as the three approached him. "How are you three holding up?" Naruto asked, glad they along with Mai, Tom, Kuritsuchi, Ino, Haku and Shinji survived the battle. "We should be asking you that. You're the one dumb enough to try fighting the Avatar when he was that angry," said June, though one could hear the concern in her voice, while Naruto shrugged. "Wasn't trying to fight him, just doing what I could to keep his attention on me and knock him out of the Avatar state. Good job by the way, Ty Lee," said Naruto, nodding at the brunette, who nodded hesitantly. "Yeah, I'm glad I could help," Ty Lee replied, still shaken by everything that happened and then seeing the Avatar in such a state and the power he had with just one element. "What about you, Azula?" questioned Naruto, looking at his fiancée, who also looked slightly shaken. It's not what I expected. It was just madness everywhere and so much death," Azula replied, looking around, having only heard about glorious Fire Nation's victories and those that died fighting for their homeland, but she didn't see anything glorious about this. "Death is never easy whether it's that of an ally," said Naruto, looking over at a tearful Mai comforting a crying Tom, while their parents' bodies were collected to be taken for a proper burial. "Or an enemy. It's something I hate seeing every time I see it, but no, there's nothing I can do about it. Only hoping to end things peacefully or quickly if it comes to a fight," Naruto said, making the trio look at him. "Why do you even do this? You don't enjoy killing and you try to find peaceful solutions. Why do you even stay in the army?" June asked, with Azula and Ty Lee also wanting to know this, since Naruto didn't seem like he was suited for being in the Fire Army. "HMPH, you already know I'm not like the majority of the Fire Army, that's because I was an orphan, a street urchin really. I didn't go to some school or grow up with a family spouting propaganda bullshit that everyone else is told. The only thing I cared about was surviving and being able to support myself. When I learned I was a firebender, I saw an easy way in joining the army. But I didn't have the money to enroll into the military academy or the talent to get sponsored, that is until I was trained by my masters. Then I returned, I was able to get sponsored and enrolled into the academy, then graduated when I was 13, now having a means to support myself, and if I earned a reputation, that'd just be a bonus," Naruto explained, surprising the three at hearing why he joined the Fire Army. "What changed?" questioned Ty Lee, having seen how Naruto interacts with his forces on the ship and seeing the genuine sadness for those that died. "I learned more about the war. Like I said, I didn't attend any school, so I didn't know anything about the war, only seeing it as a means to support myself. But after joining the academy, I did learn more, that it was started as a means to spread the Fire Nation's prosperity to the other nations, to unite them all together, rather than having them live separately. And I liked it, the idea of helping unite the world and make it better for everyone. What I don't like is how the war's gone from spreading our prosperity to simply global conquest and eliminating all obstacle, like wiping out the air nomads and raiding the Southern Water Tribe, as well as other atrocities that I didn't agree with. But I stayed, knowing I was the only one who seemed to actually care about making allies with the other nations, rather than conquer them, and I was the only one who believed in choosing peaceful solutions over more fighting. Not everyone agreed with my views, but they also can't argue with the results," said Naruto before turning to look at them. "That's why I stay with the Fire Army, because I truly believe in the goal of this war, to unite the nations and help them grow and evolve by working together. And I also can't leave, not until this war has ended. Because if I leave, then the friends, allies, enemies, everyone that's died during this war, they'd have all died for nothing. And I'm not going to let their deaths mean nothing, not when I can help ensure this war ends before more people die," Naruto said, with the three looking at him with wide eyes, before June laughed lightly. "Just when I think I have you figured out, you go and surprise me again. Don't think you'll be getting rid of me anytime soon, Foxy," said June while winking at him before leaving to go grab some of the earthbenders to cash them in. "I think that's really amazing, Naruto. You're a really good person and I'm happy I get the chance to work with you," Ty Lee said, smiling at Naruto before hugging him, with her then going over to Mai to comfort her and Tom. "And what do you think?" Naruto asked, looking at Azula, who looked unsure after everything he said. I don't know what to think," muttered Azula, with Naruto nodding and putting a hand on her shoulder. "Give it time, Azula, I'm sure you'll figure things out on your own, but I'm always here for you if you ever need anything," said Naruto, the Fire Princess nodding slowly in response. "I also heard your firebending is back," Naruto stated, making Azula frown and hold up her hand, creating a fireball, only for it to once again be orange and fizzled out. "I did, but it's gone again," Azula replied, upset that she lost her firebending again. "Well, what were you doing when it came back?" questioned Naruto, wondering what she must have been feeling at the time. "I was watching the fighting, everything go on before I saw Ty Lee about to be hit and then I ran towards her. I didn't think about anything else, but wanting to save her I remembered her show and her promise, then I was just firebending like I always do. But then it was gone again once the fighting ended. Explained Azula, causing the whiskered firebender to smile at hearing this, which made the Ravenet frown at him. Looking at her hands, Azula wondered why she was able to firebend to save Ty Lee, but now she couldn't anymore. You know why it came back, don't you? Azula said accusingly. Maybe. But this is a lesson you'll have to learn on your own, Azula. But I have faith that you'll figure it out, eventually. Naruto said, smiling at the Fire Princess, who quickly looked away from him. I hope you realize once we're married, I can control if you get to share my bed or not. Stated Azula, making Naruto smirk. Already thinking about being in bed with me, Azula? At least wait until we've had dinner first. Naruto said teasingly, with the Ravenet glaring at him with a faint blush before quickly walking away. Chuckling at the sight, Naruto turned forward again before frowning as he created a flame in his hand, seeing it was the normal orange, with no other colors in it. Was that really what I thought it was, or was my mind just messing with me? Naruto wondered before extinguishing the flame. But the gong. Meanwhile the gong had returned to the refugee camp, with Aang having woken up not long after only to immediately start crying his eyes out, while a teary-eyed Katara comforted him. It's all my fault, boop, Yumi's dead, BB, because of me. Aang cried, blaming himself for Yumi's death and not trying harder to stop the fighting, then losing control in the Avatar state and causing even more damage. It's not your fault, Aang, none of this is your fault. You wanted to save Yumi more than anyone, Captain Young is the one that ruined the exchange, he's the one that caused this. Said Katara, with Momo climbing onto Aang's shoulder and nuzzled against him, chirping softly. With Appa and Flopsy laying around offering their own comfort as well, while also being just as devastated at Yumi's death as Aang was. It is his fault. One of the refugees shouted, glaring at Aang, along with a few others. Think Yumi would still be alive if the Avatar never showed up? Yelled another refugee. Everything was fine until you ruined it with that Fire Nation baby. Another refugee added, with their words only worsening Aang's guilt and self-loathing, while Katara and Sokka glared at the refugees. Hey. Can't you see he's already blaming himself, he just watched one of the last and oldest friends he had left die. Aang doesn't need all of you making him feel even worse. Shouted Sokka in his friend's defense. He's right. The Avatar truly wished to save King Yumi, he couldn't have foreseen what would happen or ever wished for his death. Said one of the more emotionally mature refugees, getting the others to calm down. You have our apologies, but everyone here cared for King Yumi greatly, and to learn of his death it's hard for all of us to think clearly. Another refugee said, with Katara nodding. We understand, Yumi was Aang's friend and he's hurt more than anyone that he's dead and that he couldn't save him. Replied Katara. But it may also be best if you all left Amashu and never returned. Said the first refugee, making the gong's eyes widened at hearing. Agreed. Well, we understand you have lost King Yumi as well, but he was our leader. We put our faith in him to do what he thought was best for Amashu, but now he's dead. Another refugee added. Perhaps it's our own fault as well, for putting too much faith in the Avatar. Believing they could solve everything for us. Said another refugee, making Aang flinch before standing up. Oh okay, we'll leave Amashu and we won't return. I'm sorry for not doing more. Aang said before hugging Flopsy and jumping up onto Appa, with Katara and Sokka doing the same as the bison flew off once they were all on board. Later. Naruto stood at the gates of Amashu as all the refugees that left the city were now willingly returning, all of them simply wanting to go back home. Only for them to stop when they saw Naruto, worried and afraid the Fire Nation was going to retaliate against them. You don't have to be worried, I'm not here to fight innocent people. I am General Naruto of the Fire Army, and my words may mean nothing to all of you. But I am truly sorry for what has happened here today, and I swear that the Fire Nation did not start this, though we were forced to finish it. The ones behind this attack was Captain Young and his resistance, the men who claimed to seek to liberate Amashu, were the ones to kill King Yumi in their refusal to negotiate. King Yumi was going to be released in exchange for Governor Yukano's son, but now he is dead as well as the governor and his wife, along with numerous other good men and women. I may not have known King Yumi, but you all did and he knew all of you. It's why he chose to surrender himself, so that Amashu would not suffer by choosing to fight. Even when Captain Young and his men attacked, King Yumi tried ordering them to stand down, but they did not listen. I know none of you may care, but I am truly sorry and wish this hadn't happened. All I can do now is give you all the chance to return to your homes. As well as pay your respects to King Yumi, who will be given a proper farewell deserving of a king of Amashu and laid to rest within the royal tombs. Said Naruto, looking over the refugees, who were all surprised at his kind offer and sincere words. With the refugees trading looks with each other and muttering amongst themselves until they finally walked forward. We don't want any more fighting, we just want to go home. one of the refugees said, with everyone nodding in agreement, all of them simply wanting to return home and pay their respects to their king. Nodding at this, Naruto stepped in motion forward as the gates opened, allowing the refugees to return to Amashu in their homes. Later, after ensuring Bumi was laid to rest, Naruto and the others had returned to the royal sloop, with the addition of Mai and Tom Tom. "Do you have any other family?" Naruto asked as he, Azula and Ty Lee stood beside Mai, while watching Tom Tom be entertained by Ino and Haku with their waterbending. "We have our Aunt Mura, who owns a flower shop in the Fire Nation, while our uncle is the warden of the Boiling Rock. But Tom Tom's staying with me, I don't plan to let him out of my sight anytime soon," replied Mai, not wanting to leave her brother anywhere. "Don't worry Mai, we'll help you look after him," Ty Lee assured, with the knife thrower nodding in response. "Do you still wish to help us hunt down the Avatar? You'd be more than welcome to just remain on the ship while we handle it," said Azula, willing to let Mai stay on the sidelines with her brother, only to see her expression darken. "No, I'm still going to help. And I'm going to make the Avatar pay," Mai said, refusing to ever forgive the Avatar for what he's done, getting her parents killed and nearly getting Tom Tom killed as well with his rampage. Before looking at Naruto and Azula when they put their hands on her shoulder while Ty Lee hugged her, reluctantly returning the hug, but nodded in thanks for their support. While looking at her brother, swearing to make sure nothing happens to him. With the gong. Meanwhile, the gong were flying silently on Appa, none of them knowing what to say, while Long was still devastated by Bumi's death. The Avatar now questioning everything he's fighting for, if it lead to the death of one of his oldest and still living friends. One he can't even say goodbye to now, since he couldn't return to Amashu. But Katara, Sokka, Momo and Appa all feeling Aang's sadness and pain, while being saddened as well by the state he's in. "Katara, are we really the good guys?" Sokka asked, looking at his sister, beginning to question his bias towards the Fire Nation after the actions of Young and his men, as well as the consequences of said actions. Knowing that no matter which way he looked at it, this time the Fire Nation were the victims rather than the murderous monsters. I don't really know what to believe anymore," replied Katara, still shaken at seeing Waterbenders and Earthbender fighting for the Fire Nation, hearing that their general treated them with kindness and fairness, with them being loyal to him. But Long merely kept flying silently, hearing what his friends were saying, and honestly, even he didn't know if he was a good guy anymore. That's a difficult question to answer, Aang. In war, no one is truly the good guy or the bad guy, with it mostly consisting of good people fighting for their homes and what they believe in. But rest assured, if there's anyone that can truly be called the bad guy in all this, it's Fire Lord Ozai," said a familiar voice. With Aang's head snapping up, his eyes widening with tears gathering in them when he saw Bumi in front of him, sporting a light, solemn smile. "Bibu Bumi," Aang said, hesitantly and hopefully, with the deceased king smiling at his old friend. "It's still good to see again, Aang, no matter the circumstances," Bumi replied, making Aang choke slightly with a tearful smile. It's good to see you too. You're a spirit now, aren't you?" Aang stated sadly, with Bumi nodding in response. "Yep, but before I can start spreading my genius to the spirit world, I wanted to see you one last time and tell you, don't blame yourself, Aang. And even if you do keep blaming yourself, I forgive you," said Bumi, surprising the Avatar before he shook his head. "You shouldn't, you're dead because of me." "If only I had," Aang said, only for Bumi to stop him. "I would have stopped you. After all, who do you think bent that rock at you before you could reach me?" Bumi said before he began laughing madly, much to Aang's shock. That was you? You could earthbend the entire time," said Aang, hurt and upset that his friend could have escaped but chose not to. "Of course, they didn't cover my face after all. But please, listen Aang, I don't have long before I cross over. The reason I surrendered was because I was employing neutral Jing. You know that there's positive Jing when you're attacking, as well as negative Jing when you're retreating. But there is also neutral Jing when you do nothing. Neutral Jing is the key to earthbending. It involves listening and waiting for the right moment to strike. It's why I surrendered, I was waiting for the right moment to strike, but it seems I never got the right moment. That is who your earthbending master will be. Your teacher will be someone who has mastered neutral Jing. You need to find someone who waits and listens before striking," Bumi explained, with Aang nodding slowly. But why, though? Why wouldn't you let me save you?" Aang asked sadly, making Bumi frown and sigh. "You wouldn't have been able to free me in time, Aang. We both know it, the only thing you would have done is gotten yourself crushed along with me. And the world still needs you, not just the Avatar, but you Aang. Upon my death, I had a vision. One that showed that you and that young general you fought, Naruto, are the key to finally putting an end to this war," Bumi said with Aang looking at him curiously. "Naruto?" Aang muttered, remembering the said firebender while being able to sense that despite being with the Fire Nation, he wasn't a bad person. "He will be your rival in this war, Aang." With this war now becoming a conflict of preserving the old ways of balance or serving as the catalyst for a revolution to create something new. With the outcome depending on the both of you and your actions. Said Bumi. But how? How will know what I'm supposed to do? Ong asked, hoping his friend will be able to help show him figure out what he's supposed to do. I'm afraid that's something you'll need to discover on your own, Ong. Just believe in yourself, that's all anyone can do, even the Avatar. Believe in yourself and do what you know is right. And most importantly, never doubt yourself or those closest to you, Ong. Replied Bumi, making the Avatar nod and smile at him sadly before the king of Amashu disappeared. Having crossed over into the spirit world. 4 days have passed since the royal sloop had left port near Amashu, with it having made its way to Pohui stronghold in the Western Earth Kingdom, where the legendary Yain archers resided. The ship having arrived and dropped anchor just outside the fortress, with Naruto having left to meet with Colonel Shinu. While back on the ship, Mai sat on the steps of the top deck, watching her brother crawl around and play with his toys. Having brought his favorites with them from Amashu and managed to get a few new ones whenever they found a place to dock. Something she was thankful for as she saw Tom start to act like how he always did before the battle. Though the knife thrower could still see an underlying sadness in him, even looking around occasionally as if looking for their parents before remembering they're gone. I can at least make sure he'll still know and remember them. Thought Mai, planning to tell Tom everything about their parents when he's older, making sure he would at least know them and hold on to the memories he still has. Before she saw Azula and Ty Lee walk up behind her and sat down beside her, the Kai blocker smiling at her while the Fire Princess nodded. Hey Mai. How are you? Ty Lee asked hesitantly, with Mai giving a shrug in response. And better, I'll be even better as we put more distance in between us and that pile of rocks. Replied Mai, hoping to never see Amashu again. I also sent letters to mine and Tom's aunt and uncle, letting them know what happened and that we're okay. They sent their condolences and that we were always welcome to stay with them whenever we're ready. Mai added, having wanted to make sure they knew that she and her brother were safe, not wanting them to think they were dead as well. That's good and we're always here if you ever need anything. Said Ty Lee, putting a hand on her shoulder as the knife thrower nodded before smiling slightly as her brother came up to her with a piece of paper as ink stained his face, hands and clothes. With Tom holding the paper out to his sister, which she took and saw it was a painting of them and their parents. Her smile growing slightly at seeing her drawing self looked more angry than bored and held several knives in her hands, though they looked more like flames than knives. Good job, just keep at it a little more. Mai said while patting Tom on the head, making him smile before going back over to his toys. I was unaware you were a firebender, Mai. You haven't been keeping any other secrets, have you? Azula asked with a smirk as she looked at the drawing, making Mai roll her eyes. Yeah, I'm really a snail sloth in disguise that's also capable of firebending. Said Mai, with Ty Lee gasping and looking at her with wide eyes. I knew it. That's why you're always so grumpy and your aura is gray, you're upset that everything is moving so fast and you're so slow. Ty Lee said with a teasing smile. Yep, you really figured it out. Whatever will I do with my secret exposed? Mai said, feigning worry at her secret being revealed. Don't worry Mai, we still care about you, no matter how slow you are. Azula assured before the trio laughed after a moment, making Tom laugh as well, despite not knowing what they were laughing about. Thanks. I actually needed that. Mai said, enjoying the moment and teasing from her friends. No problem, I'm just glad to see you actually can laugh at something. Ty Lee said teasingly, with Mai rolling her eyes again. Yes. But perhaps we could also try being more honest as well with each other. Azula said hesitantly, getting Ty Lee and Mai to look at her. Honest about what, Azula? Questioned Ty Lee, wondering what she wanted them to be honest about. About each other. That we aren't really friends. Azula said while looking away, with the acrobat and knife thrower looking at her in surprise. What are you talking about? We are friends, we have been since we were little. Ty Lee said, Mai nodding in agreement. Yeah, we've known each other for years, we even agreed to help you hunt down the Avatar. That's not exactly something someone would do if they weren't friends. Added Mai, feeling her anger spike at mentioning the Avatar. Perhaps, but can we please just be honest? You two are friends with each other, you care about each other, and you can say we're friends as well, but it's only because you're afraid of me. I was the princess of the Fire Nation, not someone you could really say no to, and I was mean to both of you. I was jealous that you were always better than me at gymnastics, Ty Lee, and I pushed you around for it. Well, I made fun of you for liking Zuzu and the time I made you both fall into a fountain, Mai. Just be honest, please. Azula asked, still not looking at them. While Mai and Ty Lee were further shocked at her admittance before looking at each other, the brunette looking unsure. And the Ravenette feeling unsure as well, but also feeling a chance to let out a lot of her feelings regarding the Fire Princess. You want honesty? Okay. You were a terrible friend, you manipulated us, pushed us around whenever we did something better than you at anything. There was also that time you made us steal the mochi that my mother made for my grandmother, something that gave me nightmares about the Kamurika coming after me. Truthfully, I was always disgusted by how you disregarded others as nothing but pawns or playthings to torment. You being mean is being extremely mild with how you treated us," said Mai with a frown, but also feeling relieved to get all of that out in the open, while Azula wrapped her arms around her legs tightly as Ty Lee bit her lip. You were pretty mean, Azula, but I do consider you a friend as much as Mai," Ty Lee said, admitting that the Ravenette had been a bad friend and that she'd started being scared of her. Azula let out a shaky breath at their words, knowing she couldn't deny anything they said as it was all true. But it still hurt to hear from them, having always believed she was a good friend, just not in the conventional sense, but in the way she believed what being a friend was like. Thank you for being honest. And while I know I never really showed it, I did genuinely care about both of you and considered you my closest friends, my only friends really. Even if you were scared of me, you still stayed around, played with me, talked with me, and I really enjoyed those times. It felt nice being able to act like anyone else, even with you both knowing who I was and how I always acted. And it probably doesn't mean much, but I'm sorry for how I treated you both and not being a better friend," Azula said before looking back at them, with Ty Lee and Mai looking at her with wide eyes, not believing what they were actually hearing. "Ty Lee, I very much did enjoy the show you put on at the circus, it was amazing, and something I know only you could pull off so effortlessly, as well as something you do for someone you care about, even if it's me. Mai, I'm truly sorry for trying to go back on the deal to get your brother back and for everything that happened during the battle. And I want to thank you both, that despite how I've acted and treated you, you've still stuck by me even if it's out of fear, it means a lot," said Azula, taking a deep breath before exhaling. "And if you both are willing, I would like to start over to really be friends. No fear, no manipulation, just real friends," Azula said hesitantly, while Mai and Ty Lee still looked at her in disbelief and shock. "What exactly brought this on?" Mai asked, unable to help but feel skeptical and suspicious at Azula's strange behavior. "I've just had a lot to think about recently. And I want to try being a better friend, a real friend to both of you, after everything you've both done for me. So could we?" said Azula, having been thinking over everything that's happened and everything Naruto's told her, making her want to try and change. Before she was surprised when Ty Lee smiled brightly and flipped over her and Mai, landing on the Fire Princess's other side. "Of course we can. I already said I cared about as much as Mai, and I knew you loved my show. And I promise the next one I give you will be so much better," Ty Lee said happily as she hugged Azula, touched at hearing how much she cared about them and wanted to start over. "Well, this is something I never could have even dreamed about, so it has to be real," Mai stated with a faint smirk before wrapping her arm around Azula's shoulder. "Just don't start going too soft on us, I think the idea of you being nice is honestly more terrifying than you are now," Mai added, willing to start over as well and see how Azula wants to start being a real friend. Azula looked at them in surprise, having actually not expected them to be willing to give her another chance, but was also thankful they did. "Thank you both of you, it really means a lot," Azula replied with a small smile before she narrowed her eyes at them. "But I swear, if you tell anyone about this, I'll have you both thrown into the sea with metal shoes," threatened Azula, making Ty Lee and Mai smile and laugh slightly. "That's the Azula we know and love," said Ty Lee, only for them to immediately stop laughing when they looked at Tom, only to see he was missing. Tom, Mai said, shooting up and looked around for her brother, freaking out when she couldn't see him anywhere. The knife thrower began running around the deck of the ship, looking for her brother as she looked for any sign of him or hearing where he could be. Only to not see him anywhere, making her panic only grow before she ran to the sides of the ship, mentally pleading that he didn't try climbing over the sides and fell into the water. Feeling slight relief at not seeing any sign of anything having fallen into the water, but still panicked that he wasn't on the ship. "Mai, hey. Relax, I'm sure he couldn't," Ty Lee said to try and get her friend to calm down. "Don't you dare tell me to relax when my little brother is missing again," shouted Mai, making the acrobat flinch in surprise, while Mai ran past her towards the gangplank, running down it towards the guards. "Did you see a 2-year-old go past you?" Mai demanded, surprising the guards at her appearance and question. "The 2-year-old?" asked one of the guards, making Mai scowl and nearly reach for her knives. "Did you not see a toddler come down here?" Mai questioned again, with the guards quickly shaking their heads. "No, we haven't seen anyone leave the ship," the second guard replied, with the knife thrower glaring at them before turning back to the ship, only to see Azula and Ty Lee. "Mai, enough. Panicking won't solve anything, you need to relax and just calm down, alright?" said Azula, knowing that freaking out won't help. "Yeah, just relax and think for a moment. He couldn't have gotten far, nor could he have gotten off the ship without being spotted. So he should still be here. If we split up we'll have a better chance at finding him. And we will find him. Ty Lee assured, causing Mai to stop for a moment, taking a few deep breaths before nodding. Right, okay. Let's see where he got off to. Mai said before the three girls quickly split up and began searching the entire ship to see where Tom could have gone. With Naruto. Meanwhile, Naruto was meeting with Colonel Shinu, the two watching as the Yain archers practiced in the archery range down below. Seeing every arrow hit the bullseye and every following arrow splitting the prior one from before down the middle. I've only heard about the Yain archers' skills, but seeing it firsthand, I believe anything I've heard is an understatement. You've certainly done an amazing job with their training, Colonel. Said Naruto while nodding at Shinu, amazed at the skill the Yain archers had, knowing they've definitely earned their reputation of being the Fire Nation's secret weapons. Thank you, General Naruto. I make it my personal mission to ensure everything said about the Yain archers is true and proven. Unfortunately, some have begun to doubt them after the incident with the Avatar and the Blue Spirit escaping. Shinu replied, scowling in annoyance at how Zhao took control of the archers, only to make them look like fools when the Avatar and Blue Spirit escaped the stronghold. Anyone who doubts the Yain archers' abilities are fools. The fact remains that they alone are the only ones who have actually succeeded in defeating and capturing the Avatar. And I'm sure they'll be able to do so again. Naruto stated, with Shinu nodding in agreement, not minding that the High General requesting the use of the Yain archers. Of course, you have my word they will not fail. And I've already assembled the team you requested, 9 of the best Yain archers, led by the 3 whose skills are unrivaled. Said Shinu before motioning Naruto to follow him, with a whiskered firebender doing so. Following the colonel down into a large courtyard, Naruto looking around in surprise at seeing a much more complex archery range, one that looked like it had been converted into a massive obstacle course. While seeing 9 Yain archers running around, dodging obstacles, jumping over pits, scaling walls, and shooting moving targets, while some of them didn't even need to look at the targets as they fired arrows. These 9 are some of the best archers you'll see, having pushed themselves harder than any others, training themselves to track, locate, hunt, and capture or kill their targets. They can shoot a moving target 1,000 yards away through even the densest jungles and vanish just as quickly. And those 3 over there, they're unlike anything you'll ever see. Shinu said, motioning to 3 of the archers, with Naruto looking over at them. Seeing that one was a 17-year-old boy with fair skin, long brown hair and wearing a sleeveless dark black bodysuit with pieces of dark red leather armor on his legs, chest and back, while a quiver of arrows was strapped to his back. While the other 2 were both girls, one being 15 years old and the other being 17 as well. The first girl also had fair skin and long brown hair, with a strand hanging between her eyes, and wearing a sleeveless black and dark purple uniform, while her own quiver was strapped horizontally across her lower back. And the second girl had fair skin, dark brown hair held in 2 buns and brown eyes, while wearing a black suit with gold edging, a hood, armor on her arms and legs, and 2 quivers strapped on her back. As well as numerous weapons strapped to her uniform, such throwing knives, shuriken, stilettos and even a sword beneath her quivers. Naruto looked on in amazement as the boy stood in the middle of several pendulum blades swinging around him, while dozens of targets swung back and forth around as well. With the boy moving around the blades without hesitation and shooting arrow after arrow at all the targets, without even looking at a single one, with each arrow hitting the center of each target. Before then drawing 4 arrows and aiming them into the air, releasing one after the other, each one flying up into the air and then descending where they hit 4 switches around him, causing the blades to stop moving. While the younger girl was actually hanging upside down, aiming 3 arrows at a spinning wheel filled with targets blocked by numerous moving obstacles. The girl released all 3 arrows at once, with all 3 being embedded in 3 different targets. Repeating this until all the targets had an arrow in them, before doing it again and splitting all the first arrows down the center. While the final girl was standing on top of a platform that was spinning around before several targets were thrown into the air around her. As she was seen aiming her bow at them before rapidly drawing and shooting arrows, hitting each target before any of them could even begin their descent. Followed by her then taking out multiple shuriken and threw them through the air, slicing each target in half as they fell. That's unreal, honestly. Were any of them among the archers sent after the Avatar? Naruto asked, only for Shinu to scoff. No, they were off on another assignment, thankfully. I wasn't going to let Admiral Zhao get his hands on the best Yain archers in the world, not for his personal vanity project. You on the other hand, have been ordered to hunt down the Avatar and now have a legitimate feud with him, rather than doing it for personal glory. Replied Shinu, with Naruto nodding in response. True and understandable. But after having some time to clear our heads and think rationally after the tragedy at Amashu, it's safe to say the Avatar wasn't involved in Young's treachery. But I also can't forgive the Avatar for not doing more to stop him, despite Young clearly being in the wrong and the one who instigated the conflict. The fact that if it had been the Fire Nation who instigated the double cross, they would have fought tooth and nail against us. Naruto said, disgusted at the hypocrisy and bias the Avatar and his friends had shown, even if it had been subconscious on their part. As even if they were enemies, Naruto saw everyone as equals, regardless of rank, status, which nation they hailed from, or if they were bender or non-bender. If you don't mind me asking, General, what was done with them? Were they sent to a rig out at sea? Shinu asked, knowing that's what's usually done with earthbenders, being sent to a rig in the sea where they can't bend and are put to work. No, they not only broke a deal, but also got good men and women killed, as well as getting their own king killed. They were given a punishment that fit their crimes, execution. Said Naruto, remembering how Young and his men had been executed. Flashback. Naruto looked at Young and the members of his resistance, all of them bound in chains in a way that kept them from being able to earthbend. Along with them being forced onto their knees on a wooden stage in front of all the citizens of Amashu. Captain Young, you and your men stand accused of treason, the murder of Governor Yukano and his wife Michi, the murder of King Bumi, as well as betrayal. The punishment for your crimes is execution. If you have any last words, speak now. Said Naruto, looking at the former captain blankly, with Young having his head bowed low before lifting it up to look at the crowd. Everything we did, what I did, it had only ever been for the good of Amashu. I didn't mean for King Bumi to die, nor did I wish it. I'm sorry. Young said, wanting to at least let the people of Amashu know he didn't mean for this to happen, only for the crowd to glare at him and his men, booing as them loudly. Justice for King Bumi. Death to the traitors. Betrayers. King killers. Murderers. Hearing the shouts made Young and his men lower their heads, seeing that people they fought for had fully turned against them, now only seeing them as murderers and traitors. Normally, execution within the Fire Nation is death by fire. But given the nature of your crimes, there's someone else who will be carrying out your sentence. Said Naruto before stepping aside as Mai walked up onto the stage, glaring at the resistance members hatefully. You know, the funny thing is, I don't like needlessly killing. I think it's wasteful, pointless, and just unnecessarily cruel. It's why I prefer incapacitating enemies than simply going for an easy kill, only really aiming to injure or kill when I'm upset. And you helped orchestrate my parents' death, taking them away from me and my baby brother. Said Mai, walking down the line of prisoners until she reached the end, before slipping a knife into her hand. So, you'll understand if I enjoy this far more than I should. Mai stated before immediately turning and threw her knife, the blade flying through the air and slicing all their throats open. Cutting deep enough that they bled out within seconds before falling over dead, with Naruto catching the now blood-stained knife once it was close enough. Going over to Mai, the blonde firebender held out the knife for her, with Mai taking it only to throw it off into the distance. I don't want any reminders of the city. Said Mai, with Naruto nodding before motioning the guards to take the bodies away. Then flashback. Good riddance, then. If they can't be trusted to keep their word, then they aren't even worth being put to work. Shinu said, having no tolerance for betrayal or treachery of any kind, with Naruto nodding in agreement. So the leaders of this team, what are their names? Naruto asked, wanting to know the leaders since he'd likely be interacting with them often. The boy is Neji Hyuga, the younger girl is his cousin Hanabi Hyuga, while the older one is Tenten. Replied Shinu. The high general nodded again before he looked at Neji and Hanabi, his eyes widening slightly when he noticed something else about them. Their eyes were completely white with a lavender tint to them. Neji and Hanabi, are they? Said Naruto, not wanting to make any assumptions. Blind? Yes, they are. But don't let that fool you, they've proven time and time again that they don't need eyesight in order to hit their target. In fact, I'd say it makes them even better as all they need is to hear or feel where their target is, and arrows will be flying in seconds. Shinu said, having had his doubts about letting them join the Yain archers, but after getting a demonstration of what they could already do, he had them begin training immediately afterwards. I don't doubt it. Naruto stated, given what he just saw them do, he wasn't going to assume either of them would be any less dangerous. Line up. Shinu yelled, getting all the Yain archers to immediately stop their training, jumping back to the ground if they weren't already there before getting into a single line, with Neji, Hanabi and Tenten standing in front of them. General Naruto, it's an honor to meet you, sir. Said Neji as they all gave a bow, which Naruto turned. The honor is mine, especially after the displays I saw you all put on, you all certainly surpassed the legends of the Yain archers. Though are you aware of what your mission will be while under me? Naruto asked, with all the archers nodding in response. We're to assist you in hunting down and capturing the Avatar. Seems easy enough, he was already taken down and captured by Yain archers before. This time he won't be escaping. Replied Tenten, confident they'll be able to capture the Avatar again. I'm sure you all are more than capable, but I want you all to be aware of the danger. You all may have heard of the battle at Amashu, resulting in the deaths of Governor Yukano, his wife, King Bumi, and many others. What I don't think you've heard is near the end, the Avatar entered the Avatar state, and for the short time in it, he displayed enough power that if he hadn't been rendered unconscious, I have no doubt he would have destroyed Amashu entirely. The Avatar may be a child, but make no mistake, he is still the most powerful bender in the world, as well as an airbending master, he is not to be underestimated. Which is why, while I know you all are very skilled, you will continue training under my command as well as learning Kai blocking, allowing us to be able to fight in close quarters and take away a bender's bending. As I have doubt it will just be the Avatar we will need to face, but others as well, and I intend to make sure all of us are prepared for anything. If any of you have any doubts about accepting this mission, back out now and know it will not be held against you. There's no shame in refusing to risk your own life," said Naruto, wanting to give them all a chance to back out and letting them know the full extent of what they'll be doing and what he's expecting of them. But none of the Yain archers looking unsure or hesitating, all of them remaining determined and ready to fulfill their mission. "Don't expect us to run away like scared children, any mission we receive we fulfill, no matter what it is," Hanabi said while looking directly at Naruto, despite not actually seeing him, making the whiskered firebender nod. "Then I look forward to seeing you all perform in the field," Naruto stated before bowing to Shinu, who returned it. "Colonel, I'll be sure to bring all the archers back once our mission is completed. Good luck with the training and holding the stronghold," said Naruto, with Shinu nodding in response. "You have my thanks General and best of luck on your mission. And congratulations on your engagement to Princess Azula," Shinu replied, with Naruto nodding before he and the Yain archers took their leave to return to the royal sloop. With Azula back on the ship, Azula had begun searching the lower levels of the royal sloop for Tom Tom, soon finding herself in the prison cells, stopping when she heard her uncle talking to someone. "And the White Lotus tile is perhaps one of the most important pieces in the game, a set is never complete without one," Iroh said, making Azula narrow her eyes at who he could be talking to. Assuming he may be conspiring with someone, Azula moved quietly to see who he was talking to, only for her eyes to widen at seeing Tom Tom sitting in front of Iroh's cell. With the Dragon of the West having a large pie show table in front of him. As while he was a prisoner, Naruto had also pulled a few strings to make things more comfortable for Iroh. Like having an actual bed, regular meals and tea, as well as a pie show table instead of tiles. Relaxing at having found Tom Tom and seeing her uncle wasn't conspiring with anyone, Azula stepped forward, getting Iroh's attention. "Ah, Azula. Nice of you to visit again, I was just explaining to this young one the rules of pie show," Iroh said while smiling at Tom Tom, who reached through the bars to try and take one of the tiles. "You realize you're trying to explain the rules of a complicated board game that involves strategy and quick thinking to a 2-year-old. One, who I believe, seems more interested in trying to eat the tiles than what they mean," stated Azula while looking at him with a raised brow. "Perhaps, but I believe it's never too early or too late for one to learn new skills. Maybe you would be interested in playing a game," said Iroh, making Azula scoff as she moved to pick up Tom Tim to take him back to Mai. "I don't have time to waste on games when I'm busy hunting the Avatar," Azula retorted, with Iroh nodding slightly. "Of course. And I've heard about what's happened to Amashu, please pass on my condolences to Mai, it's never easy losing someone you care about, especially a family member," Iroh said before gaining a far-off look in his eyes, while Azula stopped before she could grab Tom Tom. Remembering the battle at Amashu, the fighting, the destruction, the death, the Fire Princess was still reeling from everything she saw. And seeing firsthand the power the Avatar possessed over just one element, not wanting to imagine him mastering all four. Before looking at her uncle, knowing he has far more experience on the battlefield. What was it like for you at Ba Sing Se?" questioned Azula, wanting to know what it had been like for Iroh during his siege. But the former general now having a haunted look in his eyes, while memories of the siege began returning to him. Hammering away at the outer wall with trebuchets, the earthbenders launching dozens of rocks at them without pause, those that had been crushed and injured by their impact. Before finally gaining a foothold after bringing the wall down, but by then his forces were tired, weary, and wanted to stop, but couldn't, not with how far they've gotten. Until the news came to him of Lu Ten being mortally wounded during the battle, but by the time he learned of it, his son was already dead. Remembering how he rushed to where he was, wanting to at least be with his son in his final moments, only to be too late. Arriving only to see his body being prepared to be returned to the Fire Nation for a burial. But that having been the moment when he finally looked around and saw that there would be no end for the siege. It would continue, no matter what they did, no matter how many losses either side suffered, it would never end. That had put an end to any desire Iroh had for battle or glory, all he wanted was to return home with his men, none of whom wanted to continue fighting either after all the losses they already suffered. And while many saw him as a coward, a failure, and weak for letting his emotions interfere with the outcome, he still remembered the relief in the eyes of those who served under him. All of them relieved that they could finally go home rather than throwing their lives away in a siege that wouldn't end. Then learning how his father suddenly died, Iroh lost any desire to even try and fight Ozai for the throne, no longer caring for power or status anymore. But the memories stayed with him, they were things that Iroh would never be able to forget. Lee and Uncle Azula called out, looking at him in annoyance at how he's just sat there without saying anything, with Iroh being pulled from his thoughts and memories. It was dark. Even during the day, the sky was covered by an endless sea of smoke and fire, most of the siege had been spent breaking through the outer wall. I lost count of how men and women I lost during that time, until we finally broke through and gained a foothold, but then I learned your cousin had been mortally wounded. But, by the time I found out he was gone. That's when I learned the siege never would have ended, we could continue hammering away at their walls, but they would keep fighting. It would only lead to more death, more destruction, more violence, and my men were tired and weary, their morale was wavering, and all of us we merely wished to see home again. Said Iroh, looking down, while Azula looked at him with wide eyes, having never actually thought of how Liu Ten died or how he learned about it. It wasn't anywhere as bad at Amashu, but it was still like nothing I've heard. It wasn't glorious, there was no honor, it was just survive or die. Even if we won in the end, so many still died that it didn't even feel like a victory. Azula said, leaning back against the wall before sliding down it. Yes, I have had my share of victories in battle, only for them to still feel empty when you see the cost they came at. But I never really saw it, believing those that died did so to help win the war, it was only after Ba Sing Se that I truly saw the cost of battle. Iroh stated, thinking of the hollow victories he had won. But it also helped me learn and grow as well. I used to think that failures were a shame that could never be wiped away, something that you would never be able to forget, no matter how much you wished to. Only now, I see that failures are not something to be ashamed of, they are merely another opportunity to begin again, this time more wisely. I was able to grow from my experiences and believe I have grown to be a better person. It's something I believe you can do as well, Azula. You may have failed, but they are your chances to try again, and eventually you will find your way to molding your own destiny. Said Iroh, with Azula looking away before glancing at him. And what if I've already run out of chances? Azula asked lowly. Then keep believing in yourself and hope that you still have a chance to be better. But a little help from others can be a great blessing as well, such as your friends and future husband. Iroh replied, making the Ravenet turn back to him, seeming to contemplate his words before standing up and picking up Tom Tom. I suppose you can say something wise every now and again. It's only a shame you chose to be an old pervert to June, rather than a wise old man. Azula stated, causing Iroh falter and look embarrassed at his past attempt to flirt with June and pretend to be paralyzed. Yes, well I simply see the beauty in everything, even one as dangerous as June, and merely wished for her to know there are those who appreciate her beauty. Which I will not be doing from in here, thankfully. Said Iroh sheepishly, muttering the last part to himself with a shudder. Even that June had come here to give him a piece of her mind while pelting him with Shirshu spit darts and leaving him paralyzed, it made Iroh thankful he was locked away. Not doubting she would have done a lot more than yell at him and leave him temporarily paralyzed if she could actually reach him. But Azula looking away in annoyance, but having a small smile on her face while trying not to laugh, before covering it up as a smirk. Well, I better be getting this child back to Maya before she tears the ship apart searching for him. Perhaps I'll visit again whenever I need to annoy someone. Azula said before taking her leave with Tom Tom. I will look forward to when you visit again, and the offer stands for a game of pie show. Said Iroh, before watching his niece leave. Once she was gone, Iroh looked up at the ceiling with a frown on his face, thinking over what's happened to Amashu. The Avatar may not know it, but he has lost the respect of several members of the White Lotus with King Bumi's death. Thought Iroh, saddened at having learned of Bumi's death. While knowing several members of the White Lotus wouldn't take too kindly to the loss of one of their oldest and wisest, if not most eccentric, members. But perhaps it is time that we also stop being so reliant on the Avatar as well. Iroh thought, remembering a conversation he once had with Naruto on the subject during his brief time with him and Zuko. Flashback. Any luck in locating the Avatar, yet? Naruto asked as he and Iroh sat across from each other, playing a game of pie show. Unfortunately, no, we have traveled to many locations where the Avatar could be hiding, or where he could have spent time to master his bending. But I fear that my brother has only sent Prince Zuko on a futile mission, finding someone that may have long since passed and been reincarnated as a waterbender. Though he is convinced the Avatar is still out there, hiding away for the moment to strike. Replied Iroh while shaking his head sadly, believing this was a fool's errand and simply a way for Ozai to get rid of Zuko without actually killing him. Perhaps it'd be better if the Avatar didn't return. Stated Naruto, making Iroh look up at him with a frown. Do you believe the world is better off without the Avatar? Questioned Iroh, only for Naruto to shake his head. You misunderstand General Iroh, I respect the Avatar and their duty to keeping balance in the physical world and spirit world. But I don't believe they should be the one to solve all the world's problems, only intervening when they are truly needed. And when they do, they must never doubt their decisions and go through with everything they intend to accomplish. The Avatar believes the four nations should remain separated, believing it keeps everything balanced, but that also prevents them from growing. You've heard of Yu Dao, right? Naruto asked, confusing the Dragon of the West for a moment before nodding. Of course, one of the first colonies created and they make the finest metal in the world. Iroh said, having even commissioned weapons and armor to be made there, back when he was still a general. I've been there a few times, it's an amazing city, having grown from a poor backwater city to having a thriving metalworking industry. And it was done by Fire Nation and Earth Kingdom citizens working together, combining their cultures to create something even better. Mayor Morishita has even married an earthbender, and they have a daughter, Kori Morishita, who's also an earthbender and a skilled one, the last time I saw her. Especially when she uses her spiked meteor hammer. That's something that could have never happened with the Avatar around, not being able to blend and mix the four nations together to create something new and even better, as well as everyone depending on them alone to solve their problems, rather than learning to solve them on their own. Explained Naruto, making Iroh gain a thoughtful look since he couldn't fault that thinking. Well, I can't truly fault such beliefs, but I believe no matter what the Avatar will always be needed. Stated Iroh, with the High General nodding in agreement. I do as well, but the Avatar needs to accept that things change, that they need to change if they're ever going to improve. And the rest of the world needs to accept the idea that there won't always be someone for them to run to for help, either. Said Naruto, with the Dragon of the West nodding as well, knowing that was true before he smirked at the blonde firebender. Now perhaps you can tell me about Mayor Morishita's daughter, who you seem to hold in such high regard. Not planning to settle down so soon, are you? Iroh asked, causing Naruto to blush lightly and give him an annoyed look. Just focus on the game, I don't want to beat you too quickly. Said Naruto, making Iroh laugh at how he didn't answer him. Then flashback. Perhaps it is time for the world to change. Thought Iroh, contemplating what will happen in the coming days. With Azula. Meanwhile, Azula was making her way back to Mai to return Tom Tom to her, though she was having a hard time paying attention as the toddler kept trying to grab her hair. Stop it. Azula said, grabbing Tom Tom's hand again as he tried pulling on her hair. Only for him to try again, this time trying to reach to pull at her hairpiece, making Azula hold him out while narrowing her eyes at him. Don't touch that either. Just try to behave yourself, little person. You can bother Mai and Ty Lee all you want once I find them. Said Azula, only for Tom Tom to try and reach towards her while cooing happily. Stop it. Stop doing whatever it is you're doing. Azula said, trying to remain indifferent and cold, but found it difficult, starting to think he actually looked cute and somehow happy with her. Just wait until we find Mai, so you can bother her instead. Said Azula as she kept walking while holding Tom Tom away from her, doing her best to not look at him, hoping they'll find Mai soon so she can take her brother back. Before her eyes widened when she heard Tom Tom start whimpering, making her look at him only to see tears in his eyes. No, 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 no. Don't even think about, said Azula, only to flinch when Tom Tom started crying loudly, making the Fire Princess panic. Alright, fine. Here, see, I'm holding you so you can stop crying. Azula said, knowing that Mai would kill her for making Tom Tom cry, before holding Tom Tom closer while hoping that'll get him to stop, only for it to not work. Okay, children enjoy stupid and foolish things, said Azula before looking around to make sure no one was around before looking back at Tom Tom and began making faces at him. See, it's funny because it's stupid, right? You can stop crying now. Said Azula, only to see that didn't work either, with her panic growing that nothing seemed to work. Before the Fire Princess stopped as she remembered something, one of the few good memories she had of her mother when she was still very young and actually received attention from her. Don't cry, little one. Azula said softly while wiping away Tom Tom's tears, making him stop for a moment and look at her. There's no need to cry anymore, nothing will be able to hurt you, as long as I'm here, alright. As long as I'm here, you only need to laugh and smile, can you do that? Said Azula before poking Tom Tom lightly in the stomach, making the toddler giggle. See, isn't that much better? Always remember, as long as I'm around, you'll never have to cry again, do you know why? Because you are safe and you are loved, always. Never forget that. Azula said softly, not even noticing Tom Tom had stopped crying and was smiling again, along with grabbing a strand of her hair as well. But the Ravenet being too lost in thought to notice, not sure if she'd even remembered that, or if it was just something she imagined to make up for never having her mother's attention, like Zuko. You're really good at that. Naruto stated, snapping Azula from her thoughts as she looked at him with wide eyes, seeing the High General leaning against the wall and smiling at her. How long were you standing there? "And when did you get back?" Azula demanded, not wanting anyone to see her like this. "Just a few minutes ago, along with a team of Yayan archers that'll be joining us. I ran into Ty Lee and learned Tom Tom wandered off, so I came to help search, but it seems that's no longer needed," said Naruto while walking up to them, patting Tom Tom on the head, making the toddler look at him. "And you did pretty good in getting him to settle down," Naruto added before Azula quickly handed Tom Tom to him and turned away. "It was nothing. I was just saying nonsense, anything to get him to stop," retorted Azula while crossing her arms before she heard Tom Tom giggling, making her curious as she glanced back at them. Seeing Naruto smiling at the toddler and bouncing him lightly before creating several small flames that danced over Tom Tom's head, much to his amazement and fascination. The Fire Princess, feeling herself turn full towards them, taking in the sight of Naruto holding the young child as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "It didn't sound like nothing or nonsense. Was that something your mother used to say to you?" asked Naruto, making Azula scowl. "No. She was too busy focusing all her attention on Zuzu. The only attention she gave me was to scold me or send me to my room. She never loved for me, she never even cared for me, not that I cared for her, either. Zuzu could have all her attention for all I care, it would explain why he's so weak, too busy being coddled and sheltered," Azula said, acting like she didn't care what her mother did, not admitting how angry and hurt she really was. Only to suddenly feel Naruto take her hand in his, making Azula look at him to see he was looking at her now. "It's alright if you want to be upset, Azula, you can try to hide it. But I can see it does hurt that your mother didn't give you as much attention as your brother. And that's normal, you should be hurt and you should express that, not keep it bottled up all the time. But after what I saw, maybe she did care about you in the beginning and you've just forgotten those moments, only remembering her scolding you and sending you to your room," Naruto said, making Azula frown and take her hand back. "What would you know? You didn't know her and you barely know me. Besides, you don't even know what it's like to have a mother," Azula said, hoping that'll get him to leave her alone. "You're right, I don't know what it's like and I don't know anything about Princess Ursa. But I have seen other families, how mothers take care of their children. I saw how Michi ran out into the middle of a battle to try and save Tom Tom. I've even seen regular civilians willing to give their lives to protect their children. While I don't personally know what it's like, if there's one thing I've learned, it's that one thing you can never doubt is a mother's love for her children and the lengths she'd go to keep them safe. And maybe your own mother simply saw how strong you already were and didn't think you'd need her anymore," said Naruto, with Azula looking away from him. "And I do want to get to know you better, Azula. To know more about who I'm going to marry so we can have an actual relationship," Naruto added, making the Ravenet glance at him. "Why? Why do you care? Why do you want to know me?" Azula muttered, not sure why he was trying to be nice with how she's treated him before and still did, occasionally. "Because you deserve someone that cares about you and you deserve to be happy," stated Naruto, causing Azula to look at him with wide eyes. "By the way, with how you handled Tom Tom, I think you'll make an amazing mother yourself one day," Naruto said, smiling at the Fire Princess, making her blush and quickly look away again. Whatever. Let's just go find Mai," said Azula before quickly walking past Naruto, with the High General laughing slightly as he followed her. Though he was surprised a little when Azula slowed down to walk beside him and held his hand. I think you'd make a good parent as well," Azula said lowly without looking at him, making Naruto smile and squeezed her hand gently. Having left Pohyui's stronghold and starting their way along the Earth Kingdom's coast, everyone could currently be found on the top deck the following day. With today being the first Kai blocking lesson that Ty Lee was going to be giving them. While Azula glanced around at the other soldiers, spotting Kuritsuchi, Chimjai, Ino, and Haku, along with several other soldiers she's taken notice of. One was a fairly tall woman with fair skin, pupilless brown eyes, and green hair that she tied in a bun on top of her head, with a hair needle running through it, and one short and long strands of hair with orange tips, framing each side of her face. Along with being one of the few not wearing armor, instead wearing a sleeveless backless top, short tight pants, with 2 lapels on the front and the back, an obi around her waist, as well as purple arm warmers which extend up to her shoulders, bandages around her tights and ankles, and black sandals. Along with a black headband with the Fire Nation emblem on it. This was Pakura, a skilled firebender that Azula learned specialized in absorbing the heat out of objects and even people, as well as evaporating the moisture in their bodies. Another was a girl who has long reddish-brown hair, lightly tanned skin, and blue eyes. With her wearing a cyan blue guy with a cream-colored vest over it, blue shorts, dark arm and leg bands, and brown sandals. This was Amaru, a waterbender and healer under Naruto, though she was capable at fighting, even incorporating the use of poisons in her bending, she preferred healing than fighting. The third soldier was a young man with pale skin, short, unkempt, black hair, black eyes and a relatively broad nose and well-defined eyelashes that returns upwards at each end. With him wearing the standard fire army armor. This was Uchiha, another skilled firebender and swordsman, along with having a more laid-back and humble attitude despite his talent. The fourth was a very tall, muscular young man with fair skin, spiky orange hair and red-orange eyes. With him only wearing black pants and a long red cape with the Fire Nation emblem that covered his entire body. This was Go, an earthbender with an unusually calm disposition, though Azula's heard that he becomes an entirely different person in battle, turning into a complete monster when needed. Next were two non-benders Azula hadn't originally given much thought to, given they weren't benders until she heard more about them. The first being Kiba Inyazuka, who specialized in tracking targets along with utilizing metal claws on his gauntlets and boots. Even having metal fangs created to put in his mouth, allowing him to fight like a wild animal. And the second was Shikamaru Nara, who was possibly the laziest person Azula's ever seen, having seen him falling asleep during meetings and even laying around on the ship, simply staring up at the sky. The only reason she hasn't tried anything against him for such behavior was because he's under Naruto's command. And the fact that he's also apparently Naruto's top strategist, a claim she found skeptical until Naruto let her look over several plans Shikamaru had created. All of which detailing different potential scenarios that could happen during their mission. But Azula having looked them all over in disbelief, having sat with her father during a few war meeting, so she knew a little about the planning put into the moves and strategies the Fire Nation makes. But Shikamaru seemed to take it a step further and thought over every possible scenario that could happen and made a plan for it. Then made a backup plan in case it failed and another backup plan in case that one failed. Leaving the Fire Princess stunned that anyone could be that smart, but also left him be after seeing proof of his abilities. Though everyone's attention turned to the front of the ship when Ty Lee appeared flipping through the air past them, before landing in front of everyone with a bright smile on her face. "Hello everyone. My name's Ty Lee, and I'll be your Kai blocking instructor," Ty Lee said with a bow before standing up straight. Now then, for everyone who doesn't know, Kai blocking is an ancient technique that's practiced in secret, given how it can leave benders helpless by temporarily taking their bending. It's not something widely known by those who practice it. It focuses on delivering quick jabs and punches to opponents' pressure points, with them being fast enough to not give enemies a chance to dodge or retaliate. The strikes can be delivered with your fingers and knuckles, as well as pressing down hard enough, which requires a good amount of strength in your fingers to effectively Kai block your opponent. It's also possible to use your feet, but that requires good flexibility and accuracy, otherwise it'd just be a regular kick. Ty Lee explained while looking around at everyone to make sure they were paying attention. Though Kai blocking is able to block a bender's Kai and even leave them paralyzed, which also makes it effective against non-benders to paralyze their limbs. The attacks can also be light enough so they can still move but are unable to bend, while the strongest attacks will block their Kai, paralyze them, and leave them feel pain afterwards. However, while it's a useful skill, it's not perfect since if opponents are aware you can Kai block them, then they'll be able to anticipate it by adapting to avoid getting struck or make sure to keep you at a distance with their bending, if they have it. Strong enough armor also makes Kai blocking useless, since you'd be unable to hit their pressure points. So, if you're fighting an opponent that knows you can Kai block, you'll need to find a way to get in close enough to strike, as well as remove the armor they're wearing if they're wearing any. Said Ty Lee, wanting to make sure they knew the strengths and weaknesses of Kai blocking, so they didn't think it was all powerful or anything to use. Now then, I'll need a volunteer to give you all a demonstration of Kai blocking and where to strike your opponents. Ty Lee said, knowing she'd need someone to volunteer to help her demonstrate Kai blocking, at least until they got a proper training dummy to practice on. With no one looking eager at the chance to be Kai blocked, even if it's just a demonstration, none of them wanted to experience being cut off from their being or paralyzed. "I'll do it," Naruto said, stepping forward, much to the shocked Ty Lee, Mai and the Iron Archers, while no one else looked surprised that he'd volunteered. He's not serious, is he?" Mai asked, looking at Azula, not believing he'd volunteer to be used to demonstrate Kai blocking. "Mai, I've only known him for a few days and talked with him even fewer times. And what I've seen so far, yes he's serious," replied Azula, not knowing much about Naruto, but from she's seen and learned ever since this mission began he would do something like this. Are you sure, Naruto? If you don't want to volunteer I'll understand," Ty Lee said, hesitant at the idea of Kai blocking the whiskered firebender, only for Naruto to smile reassuringly at her. "It's alright Ty Lee, really. But if it helps, you don't actually need to Kai block me outside of lessons where you need to. Besides, I trust you," said Naruto, surprising the brunette before she smiled and nodded. "Okay, if you're sure, and thank you Naruto. Though you'll actually need to take off your armor and shirt since I need to show where to accurately hit on the body," said Ty Lee while blushing lightly at needing him to take off his clothes. With Naruto being surprised at this before nodding as he began removing his armor, getting all the female soldiers to look at him eagerly, much to Azula's annoyance. "Remember who he's marrying," Azula said in annoyance at how they were looking at her fiancé. "You aren't married yet, princess, and we aren't wasting the chance for a free show," replied June while looking at Naruto, eager to see him without most of his clothes, making the fire princess growl lowly. "Lighten up, sweetheart, and enjoy the view like the rest of us," Kuretsuchi added, grinning in excitement as Naruto took off his shirt, leaving him in just his pants and boots. "Anything else you need me to do?" Naruto asked, looking at Ty Lee, who was looking at him with wide eyes and a bright blush on her face. "Ooh," Ty Lee said, feeling her mind go blank for a moment as she only looked at his muscular body, torn between cursing Azula for being engaged to him and wanting to know if she'd be willing to share. "I'll show them how flexible I really am," thought Ty Lee with her eyes glazing over for a moment. "Ty Lee," said Azula, narrowing her eyes at her friend upon seeing how she's basically drooling over Naruto while snapping the Kai blocker out of her increasingly mature thoughts. Right. Th, that's perfect, Naruto. You just stand right there," said Ty Lee, embarrassed at her behavior and what she was thinking. "Now everyone pay close attention to see where to strike an opponent's pressure points, as you'll need to be extremely precise otherwise they won't work." And Ty Lee said, trailing off when she looked at Neji and Hanabi, remembering that they're blind and couldn't actually see. "Don't stop on our account, we'll be able to see everything just fine," said Hanabi, knowing Ty Lee stopped because of them. "Well, we can't see like the rest of you, we can hear and feel the vibrations around us, giving us a form of echolocation similar to bats, which also provides a view of our entire surroundings, rather than just what's in front of us. We'll be able to still see where to strike," Neji said, surprising and amazing several soldiers at how they could still see everything around them. "Oh, well, that's good. Alright then, once more pay attention to where I strike. And remember, be fast and precise," said Ty Lee before she began going through the motions of her Kai blocking, giving gentle taps to each of Naruto's pressure points, not hard enough to do anything, but enough to show where they were. With everyone working to mimic her movements, imagining someone standing in front of them to strike their pressure points. Azula and Mai having the easiest time copying the movements from all the time they've spent with Ty Lee, giving them a better understanding of Kai blocking. While the Yain archers were also starting to get the hang of it, given being quick and precise was part of their training, along with having perfect accuracy. "Think we'd be able to use Kai blocking with our bows and arrows if we strike an opponent's pressure points?" Tenten said, looking at Neji and Hanabi, along with the other archers who had similar thoughts on if they'd be able to do such a thing. "It may be a possibility, but I'm unsure if our regular arrows would be able to work the same as a jab to a pressure point," replied Neji, with his cousin nodding in agreement. "Agreed. Though it may be possible if we used blunted arrows or different arrowheads to simply impact rather than pierce," Hanabi added, with the archers thinking it over along with the idea of using different kinds of arrows that could be used to Kai block opponents. Not a bad idea. Wonder if I could do the same with my whip," thought June, intrigued at the idea of using her whip to strike her opponents' pressure points to paralyze them, giving her another method of incapacitating and capturing targets. Mai also had similar thoughts about being able to use her knives to Kai block opponents, knowing she'd be able to hit their pressure points with her accuracy. "Let's see how dangerous you are without your bending and being full of knives," Mai thought darkly, imagining using such a method on the Avatar to leave him helpless and take her time getting revenge on him. After giving a few more demonstrations of where to strike, Ty Lee turned back to everyone, clapping her hands together with a smile. "Alright, I think that's enough of a demonstration, now to put it into practice. Everyone get into groups to practice Kai blocking each other, you're free to hold back from actually Kai blocking, but make sure you still try to use some strength," said Ty Lee, with everyone nodding as they got into groups. Later. Everyone continued practicing Kai blocking for a few hours, making good progress in learning the fighting style, with Neji and Hanabi also proving to have a talent for it. With the lesson soon coming to an end as everyone moved on to more independent training. "I gotta say, Aura girl, you certainly make for an effective teacher," June stated as she trained with Naruto, Azula, Ty Lee and Mai, actually impressed with the acrobats lesson. "Hahaha, thanks. I was actually pretty nervous about teaching so many people, but I just pretended like it was another show I was putting on and it came naturally," replied Ty Lee with a smile, glad the first lesson went so well. "Well, if you keep at it like this, I'm sure you could start teaching your own classes of Kai blocking to have more people start learning it," Naruto said, knowing a lot of non-benders and even benders would want to learn Kai blocking with how useful it is, while Ty Lee looked at him in surprise. "You think I could teach classes?" Ty Lee asked, not sure what to think of that, since teaching soldiers Kai blocking was one thing, but actively teaching classes on it is another. Yeah, I mean only if you wanted to. Since you are a really talented teacher Ty Lee, so I'm sure you'd be great at showing and training others. Replied Naruto, making Ty Lee smile. Though if you don't mind me asking, where did you learn Kai blocking from anyway? Naruto asked, curious about how Ty Lee learned Kai blocking since as far as he knew, there were no Kai blocking masters in the Fire Nation, knowing if there they'd have joined the military and taught the soldiers. I actually learned from some books my family owns, I'm part of one of the noble families and was one of 7 identical sisters, and I do mean identical. It made it difficult to stand out when you're part of a matching set, so we all decided to have a talent only we specialized in, and the others stayed away from it. I chose acrobatics. But I still felt like I was part of a matching set, always competing for attention and feeling neglected, so I also learned Kai blocking. Something none of my sisters knew, and it did help that I finally had something that was really my own, but not a lot. Said Ty Lee before looking down, having always hated being part of a matching set with her sisters, having the same hairstyle, the same clothes, the same everything, nothing that was really her own. Before she looked up and smiled at Azula and Mai. That is until I attended the Royal Fire Academy for Girls, where I got to meet Azula and Mai, and they only saw Ty Lee. They didn't see one part of a matching set, they only saw me, and I was so happy we became friends, because now I really had something that was my own and people that saw me for me. Ty Lee said while smiling at her friends. Please don't get all mushy on us, there's only so much sickening sweetness I can handle before throwing up. Mai said dully, though had a slight smile on her face. Yes, please don't. You were simply not as annoying as the rest of the annoying brats sent there, as well as having actual talent. Azula said while looking away to hide the small smile. I love you girls too. Ty Lee said happily. Well, even if you have 6 identical sisters Ty Lee, you definitely aren't part of a matching set. You're very unique from what I've seen, you care a lot about your friends, enough to leave your life at the circus behind. You don't hesitate to help them or jump to their defense, you're really strong and brave, and you're not afraid to be yourself. I don't think I'd have any problem picking you out of 1,000 identical sisters because there's only one Ty Lee. Naruto said, smiling at the acrobat, who looked at him in surprise before smiling brightly and hugged him tightly. You are so sweet, Azula's so lucky to get to marry you. Smart, kind, strong, and handsome. Ty Lee said with her tone turning flirtatious along with a matching smile, giggling when she heard the Fire Princess growl lowly and flipped away from the whiskered firebender. Ooh, thanks Ty Lee, and she's lucky to have you and Mai as friends. Speaking of which, where did you learn to use knives Mai? Were you taught by someone? Questioned Naruto, unsure if she'd be willing to talk about her life after what happened to her parents. No, I taught myself out of boredom. Mai replied, surprising Naruto at how she learned knife throwing. You taught yourself to throw knives out of boredom? Naruto said, with the Ravenet nodding. I threw them at my bedroom wall to entertain myself and eventually got a lot better at it by learning to aim at more difficult targets and how to ricochet them off the walls. That part helped a lot, as it let me just bounce them around my room and back into my hand, saving me the trouble of getting up to grab them. Said Mai, before flicking out one of her knives and throwing it on the ship deck, ricocheting off to hit the railing and flying straight into Mai's waiting hand. Wow, that's definitely impressive, you taught yourself all that without a teacher. But why though? Naruto asked, wondering why she'd choose to learn knife throwing out of boredom rather than something else. Well, I guess if we're sharing stories, I was a rich only child who got anything I wanted as long as I behaved and sat still, while not speaking unless spoken to. So I stayed the perfect little girl, did everything I was told and kept my thoughts and opinions to myself, never acting out or caring about expressing myself. But that eventually got boring, so I taught myself to use knives since they were interesting and helped me deal with the boredom. Then I attended the Royal Fire Academy for Girls, met these two, and I've had a headache ever since. Mai said boredly, though was noticeably tense when talking about her childhood since it made her think of her parents. Well, I'm sure we're all glad you chose learning to use knives as a hobby since it means you got to join us. Said Naruto while smiling at Mai, who merely shrugged before stumbling when Ty Lee wrapped an arm around her. Yeah. And we wouldn't have any other way, having you with us. Since now we have more opportunities to get you to smile. Said Ty Lee, making the knife thrower look at her annoyance, though not really as she patted the acrobat on the back. You're hurting my feelings Foxy. Focusing so much on them but you haven't asked me anything. June said in mock hurt, with Naruto rolling his eyes at her, having learned her games when they worked together before. How did you two meet anyway? Azula asked with narrowed eyes. I met June while on a mission to deal with some rebels, causing trouble with supply lines, using guerrilla tactics and earthbending, making it difficult to locate where they were hiding. So I hired June to help track them down. replied Naruto, with the bounty hunter nodding with a smirk. It also helped they had some decent bounties on their head, so I'd be getting paid even more than usual, plus getting Foxy as company. Since most guys are either dumb enough to try flirting with me, ogling me, or run the moment they realize I can kick their asses. But Foxy here was the perfect gentleman, Nyla even took a liking to him. Said June, while Naruto simply shrugged and nodded. You're the best bounty hunter I've ever met, so I was interested to learn more about you and how you became as skilled as you are. Naruto said honestly, having wanted to know how June got so skilled as a bounty hunter and mercenary. How did you become a bounty hunter? Questioned Ty Lee curiously. I was born into the profession and was trained by my dad, he was a bounty hunter too. We traveled all over the Earth Kingdom, helping me get familiar with the land and was taught how to track, fight and locate bounties. That's how I met Nyla, he was a reward from a rare animal collector after my dad completed a bounty for them and we've been together ever since. While making sure to become even better once Nyla and I went out on our own. June said with a pleased smirk at her success as a bounty hunter mercenary. But I'll admit, it does get pretty boring when you're the best at what you do, that is until Foxy came along and helped spice things up. All the time you came knocking, it was always something new and interesting. And unlike the rest of my clients, he's not afraid getting his hands dirty, rather than leaving all the work to me, making it even more interesting. I even started being generous and offered a discount every now and then for my services. And of course my offer will be standing whenever you're ready, Foxy. June said slyly with a wink, making Naruto blush and look away. What offer? Azula demanded, feeling her annoyance and jealousy spike. That instead of money, we'd have hot, steamy sex after completing a job together. June said bluntly with Naruto's blush growing, while Ty Lee's and Mai's eyes widened in shock at what she just said, as Azula's face turned red in anger and embarrassment. You June, yo you really don't need to offer th thaw that, IIC simply didn't want to lolly leave yo you, to do we have everything. Said Naruto, having believed June only made that offer as repayment for his help on the jobs they went on together. You're so sweet, Foxy. But I haven't made that offer to anyone but you. Besides, the more refusals I get from you, the more I want to just tie you up. June said shamelessly, making Ty Lee and Mai blush while looking at her in disbelief, while Azula growled at June. You will do no such thing, you harlot. He is a future prince of the Fire Nation and consort of the next Fire Lord. He will have no time to waste on such deviant behavior. Azula said, grabbing Naruto's arm and pulling him towards, with the bounty hunter's smirk growing. Oh lighten up princess, you can't get angry when Foxy has so many other girls and women wanting him, you saw how they were looking at him during training. Hell, or a girl there was practically drooling. I'd say get used to the idea of having competition. June said, with Ty Lee quickly looking away with a bright blush on her face, while Azula scowled. The princess of the Fire Nation does not share her fiancé, nor does she worry about things like competition. Not that I see any in you. Retorted Azula, June merely crossing her arms under her bust pushing it up. Sorry what was that? I couldn't hear you over the sound of a little girl throwing a tantrum. Said June tauntingly, making the younger Ravinette growl at her. Come on, there's no need for you both to fight. I think you're both amazing comrades, so try to get along. Naruto said, getting between Azula and June before they could try fighting, before looking at the Fire Princess. Also, wouldn't you technically be Fire Lady rather than Fire Lord? Questioned Naruto to try and change the subject, with Azula scoffing and crossing her arms. Of course not, I will succeed my father and be named Fire Lord, as the title isn't exclusive to male rulers, unlike the title of Lord. Whether it's a man or a woman, they would be known as the Fire Lord, while their spouse would be given the title Lord or Lady. Azula said, looking forward to the day she's named Fire Lord, intending to be better than her father, grandfather and great-grandfather ever were. Learn something new every day. And I'm sure you'll be an amazing Fire Lord one day, Azula. Naruto said, smiling at his fiancée, who smirked proudly. I already knew that, but your praise is noted. At least I'll know I'll have a powerful general ruling by my side. And having you both there, as well, will help. Said Azula while looking at Naruto before turning to Ty Lee and Mai, wanting them to be with her once she takes the throne. Her words surprising both girls, before smiling. A small one in Mai's case, at seeing she really did want to start over and be real friends. The two also wishing to be there to help Azula whenever she needed them. Later. Eventually, Naruto had called an end to the training with the soldiers all going to the mess hall for lunch, with Haku, Ino, Kuritsuchi, Bakura and Amaru sitting at a table together. Before looking up when they saw Naruto approaching. None of them surprised at his appearance, having learned that Naruto tended to eat with the soldiers rather than in private like most commanding officers, seeing it as a chance to bond more with them. Something you needed, General? Bakura asked, with Naruto shaking his head as he sat down. No, I just wanted to see how you three were doing after Amashu. Naruto said while looking at Haku, Kuretsuchi, and Ino, who all shrug. We're fine, still pissed at what those bastards did and that bastard Young for daring to call us traitors. When it was his actions that lead to the death of all those people, including the very king he swore to serve and tried saving. Kuretsuchi replied, having wished to melt them in lava for their execution, but knew it was more personal for Mai to be the one to do it. Yeah, the same with that water tribe girl, who seemed to think we were brainwashed or something. Haku said with a frown. She's probably from the southern water tribe, they definitely have a lot of reason to hate us. Ino stated, with Haku nodding in agreement. Don't take it personally or hold it against her, the South Pole suffered more than most during this war, and they have plenty of reasons to not trust anyone from the Fire Nation. Naruto said before looking at Bakura and Amaru. And I want to apologize for not bringing you both and the others with us. I didn't think things would turn out the way they did, if I had known well I probably would have brought none of you, so no one would have died. Added Naruto, knowing if he'd known what would happen he would have ensured everyone stayed on the ship so they wouldn't die. You know that wouldn't have worked. Even if you ordered us all to stay on the ship, we would have ignored the order and followed you anyway. The only difference is we all would have been there rather than just a few of us. Amaru said while shaking her head. Agreed. You may be fine risking only your life, sir. But the rest of us aren't going to just stand by and do nothing if you're at risk. You know it, we know it, everyone else knows it, you're just too stubborn to accept help. Said Bakura, with the other girls nodding in agreement, knowing the High General tended to be rather reckless if it meant saving lives. Yes, unfortunately, I'm aware of how disobedient you all can be. Which makes me glad to have such loyalty from you all. Naruto said, smiling at the girls, which they returned before he got up and went to some of the other tables. With Tenten and Hanabi soon coming over to sit with the other female soldiers, looking at them before looking over at Naruto, who was now sitting and laughing with some of the guys. I don't get it. What exactly is the appeal with him? Tenten asked while looking at the other soldiers, having seen the way they all looked at the whiskered firebender, how everyone looked at him. Same. Sure, he's a powerful firebender, a high-ranking officer, seems to have a good personality, and is loyal to those that follow him. But what do you all see in him that makes you ready to die for him? Questioned Hanabi while looking around at the girls. Well, they've heard of Naruto and his accomplishments, after what happened with Admiral Zhao, it left a sour taste in the Yain archers' mouths at being under the command of any high-ranking officer. None of them liking the idea of just being used as regular soldiers when they were meant to remain unseen and take out high-profile targets and enemies. It's understandable, we've heard it all before by those that don't know the general. But he's done more than earn our loyalty and we make sure to return it every day. Ino said, with Tenten and Hanabi looking at her. How exactly did he recruit any of you to begin? 3 of you are waterbenders and you're an earthbender. She's at least a firebender, but what about the rest of you? Tenten asked while pointing to Ino, Haku and Amaru, then Kuretsuchi, and finally Bakura. The female soldiers all traded looks, smiling slightly as they remembered how and why they joined Naruto. The funny thing is, I was originally just a trainer for new recruits, despite being a skilled firebender, and more than capable of being promoted to a higher rank or joining the regular ground forces, I didn't. I honestly wasn't interested in leading my own team or forces, and I certainly wasn't going to serve under a commanding officer that only cared about results or sacrificing innocent people. Naruto had actually been one of the recruits I trained, and he got my attention with his different style of firebending and his attitude. Though I figured he'd end up being like the rest of the soldiers, simply following orders and not caring who gets hurt. But I kept an eye on him when he joined the Fire Army, watching more closely as he began rising through the ranks, and I learned about his unique methods. How he chose to try peaceful solutions rather than resorting to fighting, only doing so as a last resort when every other option failed. That's when I met him again and started getting to know Naruto, his beliefs, ideals and desire to end the war by uniting the 4 nations, rather than simply rule over them. At first I thought he was pretty naive for thinking like that, but I kept hearing more about his successes and victories and I started to believe in him. Then, when the time came and he was given the rank of general, I didn't hesitate to join him. Bakura said with a smile, happy to have found someone different from the rest of the Fire Army, someone who earned her loyalty through his actions, rather than status or power. I was actually born in the Fire Nation, my mother was a waterbender, and figured hiding in the Fire Nation would be the perfect place, hiding in plain sight among those hunting waterbenders. She married a native and eventually had me, and for a time we were happy until I awakened by bending. I showed it to my mother, but she forbid me from ever using it, scolding me for doing it. But my father had seen the whole thing and alerted the authorities about us, they came to take us away, and my mother she tried fighting them, only to be killed in front of me. I was nearly killed as well, but my bending saved me, reacting to my emotions, and I killed the firebenders and my father. Then I just ran as far as I could. I didn't leave the Fire Nation though. I moved to a new town on a different island and pretended to be a non-bender. I never wanted to use my bending again, especially for violence, but I also wanted to help people, so I trained as a healer using herbs and medicine, with some subtle use of my bending to better help and heal people. Then one day, Naruto showed up, having heard about a supposed miracle worker in my village and found me. He was even able to figure out I was a waterbender. But rather than try attack me, he only wanted to sit down and talk. I was wary at first and didn't trust him, even more so when he left. I was almost ready to pack up and run, but then he came back the next day, alone and again just wanted to talk. Eventually I opened up and started talking to him, even telling him about what happened to my family, and he comforted me, swearing he wouldn't tell anyone about my bending and continue visiting me. And he did. He visited whenever he could, telling me about the missions he's been on, venting about decisions he didn't agree with, while also helping me care for patients and gather supplies. Then he soon asked me to join him and I said yes. I learned how to fight with my bending from him, learning that my bending wasn't something to be feared, but embraced and controlled. Aku said with her own smile, sad into talking about her past, but also happy at how much better it became after meeting Naruto. I'm not from the South Pole or the North Pole, I'm actually from a place called the Foggy Swamp. Part of a tribe of waterbenders that migrated there centuries ago, to the point where we didn't think there were other waterbenders. We had our own unique style of bending and are able to manipulate plants by bending the water inside them. We also protected our home from anyone that tries attacking, including the times the Fire Nation tried getting control of it and were repelled. I was among those that helped repel them. Until Naruto showed up one day to investigate the swamp and what was keeping the Fire Army out, only to end up getting lost. I found him wandering the swamp and almost got rid of him, only for me and my comrades to easily be dispatched by him. But rather than killing us or taking us a prisoner, he apologized and went on his way after treating our injuries. It was then that I realized he was different than the other firebenders that showed up. So, I started following him around the swamp, observing him until he learned something important. That's when he called me out, learning I was following him, and after some time together, he asked me to join him and I did. It helped that I always wanted to leave the swamp when I was older, to see the world and collect new flowers. Said Ino, smiling at remembering how Naruto learned the same lesson most of her tribe learned, that they were all connected, that they were part of the same tree. I was a traveling healer, having learned it from my parents, who learned it from my grandparents, who had left the Southern Water Tribe just before the Fire Nation launched their raids on it, feeling they could do more to help people than staying in the South Pole. They helped people regardless of where they came from, beliefs that they passed on to me before I went off on my own to help people. I had actually met Naruto when he needed a healer, after he and his men had been ambushed by some Earthbender rebels. I'd been in the area when I heard the end of the battle and went to help whoever was left, with Naruto being among them. He even saved my life when one Earthbender tried attacking me for helping the Firebenders, but Naruto took them out. After I was done healing everyone, he'd simply ask me to join him, and I agreed, wanting to repay him for saving my life. But even after I did that, I chose to stay after learning more about him and felt I could do more good by staying than leaving. Amaru said, happy that she chose to stay. It just leaves me then. I'm from the colonies, my dad was an earthbender and my mom was a firebender. Well, I was born an earthbender and pretty stubborn one. Though I was technically a Fire Nation citizen, I honestly never really cared for the Fire Nation or their war, being more connected with my Earth Kingdom heritage, and I was never afraid to say it. Which definitely got me into a lot of trouble whenever I spoke out against the Fire Nation, until eventually I ended up running away to be free of it all and learn more about the Earth Kingdom. I traveled around and worked to train my bending, usually by taking part in underground earthbending tournaments, getting my ass kicked a lot until I started getting better and began kicking more ass than getting mine kicked. I was happy at being free and doing what I want, but I also missed my home and family. Eventually I decided to go back to see them and let them know I was fine, only I learned my home had been attacked by an Earth Kingdom resistance cell that were trying to liberate their stolen land. Completely disregarding how the people there lived happily there and came to coexist, which in turn led to them attacking the very people they were trying to free for their betrayal of the Earth Kingdom. Something which led to a lot of people died, including my parents. That's when I awakened my lava bending. I was angry as the love and pride I had for my Earth Kingdom upbringing turned to hatred. For taking my family away in a liberation mission for people that didn't even want to be saved, all to satisfy their own ego. So I started attacking the Earth Kingdom whenever I could, since there's not a lot anyone can do against waves of lava coming down on you. I didn't care who I hurt, only caring that they felt the same pain I did. My actions eventually got the attention of the Earth Kingdom army and their allies, leading to them orchestrating an ambush to kill me, and they nearly did. Until Naruto showed up. This was back when he was just a fire army soldier, with him having been on a scouting mission at the time and started helping me. We managed to take them all down before he took me in and helped me recover, with him even standing up to his superior officers and offered to take full responsibility for me. Eventually, we got to know each other, with him even helping to restore my shattered faith in my Earth Kingdom heritage. But at the same time, I no longer held it on the same pedestal that I once did. Before long, I was back on my feet and he didn't even need to ask me to join. I just wanted to stay by his side, eventually becoming one of the very first soldiers to serve under him once he was promoted to a captain, colonel, and then later a high general. Said Kuretsuchi with a smirk, having not regretted joining Naruto and found it's been the best time of her life. While Tenten and Hanabi looked at them all in shock and disbelief at learning how Naruto met them and earned their loyalty, but also how he helped them. Before they looked back at the high general in intrigue, part of them starting to understand how he could inspire such loyalty if he's bonded with all those under him in such a way. Okay, and you all like him? Hanabi asked while turning back to the female soldiers, who all immediately nodded without hesitation. Oh yeah. Pakura replied. It's hard not to like him. Said Haku. Who wouldn't after getting to know him? Amaru asked. Absolutely. Ino replied. You did see his body, right? Said Kuretsuchi. The girls all looked at the lavabender, who was grinning shamelessly at remembering the high general taking off most of his clothes. Don't give me those looks, you all were looking and fantasizing as much as I was. Kuretsuchi stated, making Pakura, Haku, Amaru, and Ino look away with blushes on their faces. But the female archers looking at them before turning to each other and shaking their heads, but would admit that working under Naruto may not be as bad as that brief time. Zhao took control over the Yain archers. Meanwhile, Naruto soon left the mess hall, with it not going unnoticed with how all the female soldiers watched him leave. To the annoyance of several other male soldiers, with some being more annoyed than others. I may be loyal to the guy, but sometimes I just want to beat him into the ground. I mean, come on. How are the rest of us supposed to get any girls when he's hugging them all? Said Kiba in annoyance at how Naruto's able to get girls' attention without even trying, before looking around at Shikamaru, Chimjai, Chiko, and Shisui. Come on, aren't the rest of you upset he's already engaged to the princess of the Fire Nation, has that hot bounty hunter ready to jump him at any moment, now he's got the princess's friends to spend time with. That's counting every other girl on this damn ship. Kiba said, throwing his hands up in annoyance and envy. Give it a rest, Kiba. Honestly, I don't know why you're so caught up with this, having that many girls chasing after you, that just sounds like a giant headache to me. Besides, I got enough problems without a bunch of troublesome girls after me. Said Shikamaru while resting his head on the table, with Chimjai nodding in agreement while eating his large pile of food. Shikamaru's right, I don't really see what the big deal is either. Chimjai said, not caring either about how many girls like the high general. Of course you two wouldn't care. You're a lazy bastard, and you'd only care about a girl if she was making you food. Said Kiba before looking at Shisui and Chiko. Before you say anything, keep in mind that I already have a girlfriend back home, and I am perfectly content with just one girl. Besides, saying that every girl on the ship is interested in him is kind of an overstatement. Shiho and Tamaki are two good examples of that. Shisui said, satisfied with only having one girlfriend, though knew he had his own share of admirers, while giving Kiba some words of assurance. I don't have much interest in pursuing such a relationship. Chiko stated, having never been interested in a relationship, being fine with just following Naruto's orders and enjoying spending time in nature with the animals when he could. But the tracker only able to look at them in disbelief before slamming his head down on the table, groaning at how nonchalant they were. With Shisui having essentially killed any other arguments and comments that he could make on the matter. Later. After lunch had ended, Naruto had returned to the top deck with Azula, Mai and Ty Lee to continue their training, while allowing everyone else the rest of the day off. Though not long into the training, Naruto, Mai and Ty Lee stopped when they heard Azula gasp loudly, making them look at her. Only to see the Fire Princess looking at her hands in shock and horror before she threw her fist out, with nothing happening. Azula. Naruto said in concern as they went up to her, with Azula desperately throwing her fists out and kicking her legs, only for nothing to happen. It's gone, 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 it's gone. Azula muttered repeatedly in horror as she began shaking. What's gone? Ty Lee asked while looking at the Ravenet in worry. My firebending. Screamed Azula, making Ty Lee jump at her sudden shout. It's gone. My firebending is gone. I can't even make smoke anymore. It's gone. Azula yelled before falling to her knees while breathing heavily. I think I'm going into shock. What is happening? Why is it gone? Said Azula, feeling like her entire body is falling apart and shutting down. Hey. Mai said, kneeling down and putting her hands on Azula's shoulder. Hey, Azula, look at me, alright. Close your eyes and just breathe, slowly. In and out, just relax and breathe. Said Mai while taking a few deep breaths herself, with Azula still shaking before Ty Lee knelt down and hugged her. Everything's alright Azula, everything's fine. We're here for you, you're safe. Ty Lee assured gently, while the Fire Princess slowly closed her eyes and began breathing deeply and slowly, like Mai instructed. It's still gone, my fire, it's gone, Azula said, feeling tears in her eyes that her firebending was really gone now, not just weakened or fading, but entirely gone. It's gone, but not entirely. It's just gone out for the moment. Naruto said, crouching down and grabbed Azula's hand, making her look at him. What do you mean? Questioned Azula, desperate and hopeful he could help her regain her bending. Your firebending is still inside you, but it's gone out. Fire needs something to keep it going, it needs a drive. The same is true for firebenders, we need a drive, something to keep us motivated and pushing forward, otherwise if we don't have a drive, then our inner fire will go out. Explained Naruto, having learned this during his training. So I lost my motivation. But what was it? How do I get it back? Azula said desperately, before Naruto wrapped an arm around her. That's something you need to figure out yourself, Azula. Just like you'll need to find something to reawaken your inner fire. But that doesn't mean you're helpless or alone right now, we're here to help you with anything you need. Naruto said, with Ty Lee and Mai nodding in agreement. Yeah. I'm already teaching you Kai blocking, I can also help you improve your acrobatics as well. You were already amazing when we were kids, and I'm sure you've gotten even better, but that doesn't mean you still can't keep improving. And I'll help you do it. Ty Lee said while smiling at her friend. And I can also help you learn to use knives and other throwing weapons. I mean, if I can learn to use them out of boredom, then you shouldn't have any problem mastering them in a few days. Added Mai, with Azula looking at her friends before turning to Naruto. And you? What could you teach me? Questioned Azula, wondering what Naruto would be able to help her learn. I can teach you to use a weapon, I think a guandao would be good for you, a collapsible one, so it'll be easier to carry around. Naruto replied, making the three look at him. You can use weapons? Mai asked, not expecting him to use weapons. Yeah, though my main weapon is my gunbai and kusarigama, I've learned to use other types of weapons as well to have a wider variety to use, should the situation call for a different weapon. I've even managed to train under Master Piandao to use a sword when I was looking into non-bender combat. Said Naruto, much to their shock to learn he trained under Piandao, especially Azula, who was shocked and intrigued. You trained under Piandao? How? Azula asked since outside of her brother, she knew that Piandao has never taken another student, at least to her knowledge as she's now learned. I did, and I just knew there was so much I didn't know and wanted to learn. I didn't demand, brag, or believe I deserved to be trained by him. I didn't know anything about how to use a sword and fully expected him to refuse to train me, but he did and I learned everything I could from him, even crafting my own sword. Unfortunately, I lost it during a battle not long before I was reassigned to accompany you, so I've also been gathering materials to forge a new one. Since one of his lessons was that a sword must be an extension of oneself and that by forging my own, it helps create a deeper connection with the blade. Naruto replied, much to Azula's shock and intrigue before she managed to stand up. Can we get started on training now? Azula asked, not wanting to feel helpless without her bending and hoped to start training immediately. With Naruto, Ty Lee, and Mai nodding in agreement as the latter two began training Azula, while the High General left to get her a collapsible guandao. Later. Come on, work with me Tom. Mai said as she held her brother and rocked him gently, trying to get him to go to sleep, only for Tom to keep being fussy. The knife thrower having been trying to get him to go to sleep for an hour now after finishing her training with Azula, glad they were able to help her and keep her from breaking down over losing her firebending. But now she's focused on trying to get Tom to go to sleep, which was proving harder than she thought. How did they even do this? Thought Mai, wondering how their parents managed to get Tom to behave, most of the time anyway. Before she heard a knock at the door, making her sigh and go over to it, opening it to see Naruto standing outside her room. Did you need something? Mai asked while rocking Tom in her other arm, making Naruto look at them with a raised brow. It can wait, did you want some help? Naruto said upon seeing she was starting to look tired. If you can, please. Replied Mai, willing to accept any help if it'd get her brother to go to sleep. Nodding, Naruto stepped into Mai's room, smiling down at Tom, who cooed and reached for the whiskered firebender. Hey little guy, you remember me? Then I bet you remember this. Naruto said before creating 3 small flames that began spinning slowly over Tom, much to his amazement as he looked at the flames. Seeing this, Mai began rocking Tom and humming lowly, having heard her mother do that a few times to get him to relax. while Naruto slowly began dimming the flames until they were fully extinguished, with the ravenet being relieved as her brother's eyes slowly drifted closed. Waiting a few moments to make sure he was fully asleep, Mai sighed in relief at seeing he was and put him down in his crib. "Thank you," Mai said quietly, relieved he's finally asleep, with Naruto nodding in response. "No problem, I'm glad I could help," replied Naruto. "Not just for that, but yesterday when you and Azula found him. I was ready to tear this entire ship apart to find him, but you both did and must have done more with how happy he was with both of you. So, thank you for that as well," said Mai, having been happy and relieved they found her brother. "That was all Azula actually, I only helped keep him calm, but don't tell her said that she's good with children," Naruto said with a smirk, which Mai returned before sitting down on her bed. "I won't make any promises. Now, what did you need?" Mai asked, wanting to know why he came here, with Naruto sitting in a chair across from her. "It's been a few days and I just wanted to ask how are you feeling. And it's fine if you don't want to answer, but I wanted to see how you were doing, since I know it must not have been easy, what happened. I wouldn't really know, given I've been an orphan my entire life, but I'm sure it's not easy going through something like that," said Naruto, having wanted to check on Mai after her parents' deaths and see how she was doing. With Mai tensing at the question and crossing her arms, looking away from the high general towards her sleeping brother. It's been hard, we honestly never really saw eye to eye on a lot of things, with how they wanted me to behave, how I did act, and their focus on my dad's political career. But they were still my parents and despite it all I did care about them. I just wish I did a better job at showing it now," Mai said, feeling tears in her eyes before quickly wiping them away, before feeling Naruto put a hand on her shoulder. "I'm sure they knew, and despite how they may have wanted you to act and behave, it was likely out of love and concern for you. Maybe they just simply didn't know how to be parents and did what they believed would help you succeed like they did, while still doing what they could to give you the best life they could give you. And it seems like they still let you have your freedom if they were willing to let you keep practicing with your knives and even letting you keep so many weapons on you. So, I'm sure they knew you loved them and they loved you and your brother," Naruto said while smiling reassuringly at her as Mai felt a few tears escape her eyes, which she wiped away. Yeah, I'm sure they did. Thank you, I really needed to hear something like that," said Mai, feeling a little better, but doubted the pain and hurt would go away anytime soon. "I'm glad I could help. And you know, our hunt will soon be moving more inland, we could travel to Chin Village, which will be hosting their Anti-Avatar Day festival in a few days," said Naruto, making the knife thrower look at him in confusion. "Anti-Avatar Day festival?" Mai asked, having never heard of any place celebrating a day like that. "It's only celebrated in Chin Village and is known as Avatar Day, held on the day Chin the Conqueror was killed by Avatar Kaiashi. It's basically the perfect day for anyone who hates the Avatar," Naruto explained. Though he didn't really care for it since he still respected the Avatar, even if he didn't care for certain reincarnations. But he's sure that Mai would enjoy celebrating Avatar Day, given her distaste for the Avatar now. Feeling it'd be a healthy way for her to channel those negative emotions. Sounds like my new favorite holiday," said Mai with a smirk and nodded, with Naruto nodding as well and stood up. "I'll have us start heading towards Chin Village and finding a place for us to dock," Naruto replied, with the Ravenet nodding in thanks. With the whiskered blonde exiting the room as Mai laid down, closing her eyes and soon drifting off to sleep. So this part ends here. Alright, that's it for today's video guys, let me know in the comments section how was the story and also don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I will meet you in another video, bye bye.